Hazen decisively neutralized a corrupt noble, asserting himself as a true soldier of the Empire, one who eliminates threats from within. The Gastro Empire, a vast and ancient power, prepared for a grand ceremony within its celestial palace. There, the Empire announced new general officers. Hazen, placing first, confidently accepted his position. Second place was awarded to Ima Dunir from the Agriculture Ministry. As fourth place was called, Hazen silently observed, focused on his next steps. Ima expressed surprise at Hazen placing third, expecting him to lead the rankings without contest. While she masked her disappointment, she admitted his presence prevented her from reaching first. Hazen calmly dismissed titles and origins, believing status held no meaning in true merit. As she hesitated to speak further, their quiet exchange was interrupted by a superior. Moments later, Hazen was officially assigned to the Northern District Border Guard of Galna. Hazen declared his ambition, clearly his sights set on the power of the nation itself. As they exited the ceremony, Ema voiced annoyance over his blunt criticisms of the Empire's favoritism. Despite her frustration, she quickly obeyed when warned not to speak carelessly. Soon after, Reifa reunited with Ema, joyfully celebrating the occasion of Hazen and Ema's new appointments. Their cheerful reunion faded as they reflected on the capital's stark inequality. Reifa teased Ema while praising her new position in the Agriculture Ministry, lightening the mood however. Ema grew concerned upon learning Hazen would be deployed to the troubled northern front. Remaining unfazed, Hazen welcomed the challenge, and Reifa promised to defend him if needed. Nearby, a sneering noble mocked Hazen's assignment and background, seeing it as a lowly punishment. Their former classmate Domita smugly offered false congratulations, clearly enjoying their perceived misfortune. A nobleman warned Ema to avoid associating with commoners, claiming her status demanded better company. He extended his judgment to Reifa, who cheerfully dismissed the insult and offered to protect Ema instead. Hazen stepped forward, calmly asking Domita to stop making her uncomfortable. Smug remarks followed, mocking Hazen's status and dismissing his worth despite Reifa's presence. Unshaken, Hazen declared bloodline meaningless, asserting only he could permit access to their respect. Domita lashed out with bitterness, hoping Hazen would disappear and amount to nothing more than a merchant. Unbothered, Hazen responded with a calm farewell, followed by Reifa and Ema. They parted ways, promising care, despite choosing different paths as Reifa questioned his habit of provoking others. A month later, Hazen arrived at Garnar's northern district, joining the unit as sub-lieutenant. Colonel Gedru welcomed him, surprised to see a commoner officer after 10 years. A vacancy placed Hazen in the 8th platoon, with further instructions promised later. He received the assignment without hesitation, declining to ask any questions. The colonel offered a smile and a warning, dismissing him with a formal nod. Behind closed doors, others expressed disdain, expecting his death solely for being a commoner. Jealous murmurs followed. Nobody wanted a skilled commoner among them, especially not one confident enough to smile. Training began at Ground 5 with loud shouts urging recruits to move faster. Inside the field, soldiers tackled various exercises, including climbing and pulling weighted sleds. Grumbling spread among the troops, who complained about the absurd tasks and painful effort. Mockery filled the air. Comments targeted both the trainees and the unfit overseer, despite the chaos. One soldier claimed victory in a challenge and demanded his wine reward. Wine and food were used as rewards, leading to unfair competition and frustration among soldiers. A careless remark sparked conflict, ending with a trainee being thrown violently to the ground. Hazen criticized the situation, pointing out the true reason behind the loss: poor leadership and excess weight. He formally introduced himself as the 8th platoon's new lieutenant, demanding accountability. The overseer, Sergeant Chomo, responded casually, focusing instead on Reifa's appearance. An inappropriate invitation was offered, implying there were better things than training. Mocking words followed, prompting Hazen to calmly instruct Reifa to intervene. Without hesitation, she struck down the offender with overwhelming force. Shocked onlookers learned of her Zexa origin, known for unmatched physical strength. Hazen laid down harsh rules: 30 laps or be buried alive. The troops quickly chose obedience. With a cold smile, Hazen questioned the soldier's act of feigning unconsciousness. A sudden blast of magic sent the man flying, shocking the bystanders and igniting panic. Refusing to tolerate excuses, Hazen mocked the bleeding soldier and dismissed his complaints. Frightened and humiliated, the man fled while others collapsed from exhaustion. Later, Hazen calmly addressed another recruit, offering brief but genuine concern. Hazen recognized potential in a soldier and quickly appointed him as the next instructor. He announced fair food rations for everyone, ending the previous system of biased rewards. Some recruits celebrated their progress, while others resented his success in silence. Later that day, Sergeant Dickett extended an eerie invitation to a welcome party. Suspicion lingered. Hazen sensed hostility behind the smiles, but chose to play along, feigning warmth. The soldiers insisted Hazen leave his staff behind for safety. One offered to escort him, leading the way with a suspicious grin. Inside the room, tensions flared as recruits bickered, hiding hostility behind casual banter. Hazen arrived to a forced welcome, invited to join their rough celebration. Despite reassurances, he eyed the food warily, suspecting poison in the hospitality. Hazen drank calmly, deducing that the first glass was safe while the second held poison. Feigning satisfaction, he praised the wine while his host revealed the trap too late. Without flinching, he proposed a fair toast, one shared equally by everyone. Unease spread quickly, exposing their fear as Hazen pressed them to drink. A smiling recruit reassured them, reminding them it was their own wine after all. The attempted poison plot unraveled under Hazen's calm analysis, exposing the group's clumsy intentions. Cornered and enraged, one soldier lunged with a broken bottle, shouting insults. Hazen countered instantly, unleashing Windcutter and disabling the attacker with precise magic. Witnesses froze in shock, some fearing the worst as the body hit the floor. Realization dawned he'd used magic without a staff, revealing power far beyond their expectations. Hazen remarked that revealing everything was unwise, subtly warning of unseen threats. The recruits hastily shifted blame to Sergeant Chomo, begging for mercy and claiming coercion. He pressed further, asking whether the wine was truly poisoned, reminding them that treason carried death. Smiling, he encouraged the terrified soldier to drink the same wine if it was safe. Paralyzed by fear, the recruit hesitated, realizing justice had arrived swift and merciless. Dark pressure filled the room as Hazen stood above the trembling soldiers, silent and menacing. Dickett attempted to flee in panic, but Hazen calmly blocked his escape. With one flick of his sash, he knocked both conspirators unconscious in seconds. He declared their actions treason, sparing Baz for merely being caught in the wrong moment. Before leaving, Hazen revealed the wine was harmless and ordered Baz to handle the aftermath. With a knowing smirk, Hazen reflected on the past, the word brats escaping his lips. Long ago, he was a legendary wizard, brought to ruin after centuries of power. A deep loss haunted him. Someone dear had vanished before he could save her. In desperation, he offered his soul and knowledge, defying fate itself. Reborn 3 years ago, he questioned whether his return made him divine or monstrous. Hazen stood beneath the moonlight, ready to dismantle a nation rotting with deep corruption. The platoon sprinted under pressure as Riefa chased them with strict commands. Hazen led without hesitation. A week passed. Hazen endured the brutal training, never missing a day, earning quiet respect from others. Summoned before a superior, Hazen faced surprise. The officer had not expected him to survive the assignment. Hazen calmly explained his consistent reports, highlighting his discipline and responsibility. The officer, now respectful, admitted the test had been harsh and offered an apology. During a briefing, Hazen confirmed he had eliminated Sergeant Chomo and others on his first day, reporting all details. Lieutenant Maspitza reacted in disbelief, unable to accept such losses so early in the assignment. Calmly, Hazen revealed records of multiple suspicious deaths among officers, pointing to long-standing internal rot. Rather than hesitate, he accused Maspitza of negligence, claiming preventable deaths were ignored. With a cold gaze, Hazen implied the lieutenant had allowed it to happen deliberately. While Hazen remained composed, Maspitza lashed out, accusing him of insubordination and demanding silence. Yet the threat of an external investigation visibly rattled the lieutenant, exposing his nervousness. The superior officer swiftly ended the discussion, brushing off the tension and urging clearer reports in the future. Seeing opportunity, Hazen boldly requested command of the vanguard platoon, eager to prove his worth. Permission was granted. Despite protest, Hazen was now tasked with defending the villages. With official approval secured, Hazen departed to defend the targeted villages from imminent danger. Upon arrival, he observed the Kumin tribe positioned on a ridge, still inactive but armed. Through careful surveillance, Hazen identified their leader, a man adorned with a large crown, likely a mage. He deduced the man was a noble by birth, judging from his apparent ability to wield magic. Planning swiftly, Hazen devised an ambush strategy to isolate the mage and disrupt the enemy formation. Hazen emerged from the forest, halting the Kumin gathering and declaring the land under imperial rule. The tribal leader revealed his weapon, an enchanted ice axe radiating potent magical energy. With a swift motion, he launched spinning blades of frost toward Hazen unshaken. Hazen countered with powerful bursts of wind magic, shifting the deadly trajectory. Grinning slightly, Hazen exposed the simplicity of the enemy's attack and seized control of the battle. Hazen closed in, dodging swiftly while sizing up his foe's wild, aggressive movements. The crude wand, however, held a gem of rare quality. Its brilliance matched those used only by majors. That revelation hinted at a deeper truth. The Kumin tribe might possess a hidden source of powerful gems. Gripped by determination, Hazen resolved to obtain it, no matter the cost. Unleashing shadow fangs, he launched a dark, precise strike that overwhelmed the tribal leader. The enemy leader's weapon shattered as he collapsed in defeat, his magic overwhelmed by Hazen's assault. Hazen calmly retrieved the fallen wand, only to spot the remaining Kumin warriors rallying nearby. Before they could strike, Imperial reinforcements arrived, forcing the tribe to retreat. Among the chaos, Hazen's ally fought fiercely, protecting their position with unwavering resolve. Observing the outcome, Hazen smirked, quietly acknowledging their hidden potential when truly challenged. Most of the Kumin warriors were captured, though a few managed to escape with injuries. Despite suggestions of execution, Hazen ordered respectful treatment of the prisoners, prioritizing stability over vengeance. As Hazen planned follow-up actions, he asked about translators, but communication still seemed difficult. Hidden nearby, a mysterious girl watched silently, unnoticed amid the chaos. Her presence hinted at more secrets to come, as Hazen's name echoed among the soldiers. The soldiers intercepted the girl, demanding to know her identity and whether she aided the Kumin tribe. As the commotion escalated, Hazen approached, curious about the cause of the noise. Noticing she didn't resemble a tribal member, he questioned her presence on the battlefield. Learning she understood the Kumin language, Hazen saw her value and chose to protect her. She introduced herself as Yan Lin. Hazen, recognizing the opportunity, welcomed her cautiously. Though his smile seemed suspicious, Hazen offered to escort Yan Lin to safety. On horseback, he questioned her fluency in the Kumin language and knowledge of their jewels. She revealed she traded with them peacefully, distributing profits and respecting their taboos, especially around children. Despite her small frame, Yan claimed to be 13, impressing Hazen with her maturity. Curious, he gently asked if she could use magic too. As Yan Lin's magic surged, Hazen was stunned by the overwhelming power she radiated. He recognized something familiar in her eyes, something tied to a buried memory. Hazen speculated that her vast magical energy might be limiting her physical growth. She denied any nobility, claiming to be a mere orphan with no knowledge of her heritage. Soon after, they arrived at Dynastard Village, which appeared untouched by conflict. As Hazen entered Dynastard Village, he noticed alarmed whispers about the captured Kumin tribesmen. Tension flared as villagers, haunted by loss, lashed out at the prisoners in rage. Hazen stepped forward, invoking military law to halt the mob and protect the captives. The villagers, unbound by military duty, defiantly rejected his authority. Remaining calm, Hazen reminded them of consequences, masking his intentions behind a measured smile. Whispers spread Hazen's terrifying magical potential could raise the village if provoked. Facing the crowd, Hazen clarified the army's role: protection was for those who upheld imperial law. Villagers protested, blaming delayed military aid for their suffering and venting years of resentment. He acknowledged their right to be protected, but reminded them protection required discipline and acceptance of hardship. Seeing them lash out under grief, Hazen scorned their hypocrisy, warning them to reflect before acting. Hazen dismissed the unrest and shifted focus toward Yan, requesting she lead him to the orphanage. While others offered to handle things, Hazen insisted on speaking directly with the director. Without hesitation, he declared his decision to adopt Yan himself. His overly cheerful expression drew suspicion, leaving everyone around him visibly unsettled. Hazen extended a gloved hand, offering a gold coin as advance payment. Director Norway stood protectively beside Yan, eyes closed in cautious thought as the offer settled in. The orphanage at Dynastard Village, worn and crumbling, faced harsh times. Monthly silver coin support was promised. Yan's contributions were recognized. She had even negotiated with the culturally distant Kumin tribe. With firm resolve, Yan demanded double the proposed pay. She questioned her worth and refused to be undervalued. Hazen accepted the terms, sealing the agreement with a simple word. Soon after, Yan sat behind him on horseback, carrying only a modest pouch as she left the orphanage. She explained that everything was shared at the orphanage, and Hazen remarked she'd now stay in his quarters. Shocked, Yan protested fiercely, unable to hide her discomfort at the sudden arrangement. Despite her outburst, Hazen dismissed her objections, declaring the matter settled and her feelings irrelevant. Hazen acknowledged Yan's ambition, noting that money was vital for influence in the empire. Considering their roles, he proposed adopting her as his sister. Yan cheerfully tried the title Big Brother. Her words triggered a memory of Hazen's own sister. He softened, assuring her it wasn't her fault. Shifting focus, Hazen instructed her to call him sister, revealing he'd be teaching her magic. He explained her slow growth stemmed from harboring an unusually high amount of magical energy. Uncontrolled magic could erupt violently, threatening not only the wielder but everyone nearby. Uncertain but willing, she admitted partial trust, while he asked for more. He saw potential in her insight and looked forward to shaping her abilities. As the village shrank into the distance, awe filled her. This journey was her first beyond its borders. A quiet comment struck her heart. She had underestimated her own worth during their earlier negotiation. She reacted in disbelief when he revealed how much she should have demanded for her value. Rather than aiming for extremes, he taught her to secure a fair majority through compromise. Warning followed crossing limits could justify punishment, even enslavement, under imperial law. Future plans involved her mediating with the Kumin tribe, requiring sharper negotiation instincts. Thou blunt, his smirk carried a hint of genuine belief in her untapped potential. With quiet awe, she listened as her worth was stated to be far beyond their earlier estimate. Uncertain, she asked if those words were meant to inspire her, catching him off guard. Rather than confirm, he scolded her lack of ambition, demanding more effort in return. A woman lifted her kindly, introducing herself as Riefa, Hazen's bodyguard and support. Blushing deeply, Riefa was stunned by the unexpected compliment on her appearance. Flushed with joy, she hugged Riefa tightly, calling her the most beautiful person she'd ever met. Riefa, touched by the compliment, wished aloud for someone so honest in her own life. Curious, the girl asked about Riefa's age, stunned to learn she was already 19. Riding beside them, Hazen warned against spoiling her, reminding them she was only 13. Moments later, she panicked at the fortress gates, crying out to the director for rescue. A formation of armored cavalry finally assembled Lieutenant Mospitza's unit, slow but now ready. Hazen, surprised, questioned their delay, learning it had taken them over half a day to prepare. With little combat experience, the troops often wasted time, while their leader feared injury more than war. A heavily armored knight shouted insults at Hazen, not recognizing him due to his modest appearance. Mocked for retreating, Hazen calmly responded they had already defeated the enemy and secured the village. With a sharp command, Hazen ordered the prisoners secured, drawing surprise from the watching soldiers. The lieutenant burst out in anger, demanding to know why his instructions were ignored. Remaining composed, Hazen asked what brilliant strategy the lieutenant had in mind, subtly challenging him. Cornered, the officer stammered, warning that one magical misstep could have spelled disaster. Confidence unwavering, Hazen assured them his squad would prevail, no matter the odds. Lieutenant Mospitza mocked the troops for taking too long to gear up, dismissing them as only somewhat useful. He burst into laughter, scoffing at the idea of uneducated soldiers being valuable. To him, their farming backgrounds made them expendable, mere tools for war. Hazen calmly challenged the insult, rejecting the idea that worth depended on education or rank. With eerie calm, he proposed a duel, laced with biting sarcasm and cold precision. Flustered by Hazen's challenge, the lieutenant barked orders, refusing to engage further. Before storming off, he announced that Captain Lorenzo would arrive later that evening. As dusk settled, Hazen reminded his men to rest after handling prisoners, brushing off unexpected gratitude. Yan, clinging to Riefa, was gently carried away to her new quarters. Inside the fortress, Hazen was welcomed by Captain Lorenzo, who had been waiting to speak with him. Hazen calmly stated his reason for visiting, sparking instant outrage from Mospitza. Captain Lorenzo's presence changed the mood, as he emphasized that final decisions rested with him. With cold eyes, Mospitza insisted he alone would determine how the situation was handled. Before anything could proceed, Hazen excused himself, claiming he was ordered to leave. Tensions flared as blame bounced between officers, revealing cracks in their chain of command. With permission granted, Hazen calmly asked if he could begin the formal report. He proposed a prisoner exchange with the Kumin tribe to initiate a ceasefire. While Lorenzo showed interest, Mospitza erupted, only to be silenced before interfering further. A map was presented, explaining that the tribe's mountainous territory held little strategic value. Conflict in the region remained deadlocked due to two opposing powers, pressuring the same front. Hazen revealed the plan: forge peace with the Kumin tribe to redirect focus toward the Duchy of Diord. Captain Lorenzo questioned the logistics, noting they didn't even share a language. With quiet confidence, Hazen introduced Yan, a 6-year-old interpreter fluent in the Kumin tongue. Concerns rose about the risk, but Hazen remained unfazed by the weight of failure. Even if negotiations failed, Hazen explained, The girl would survive by tribal law. Children were never harmed. Hazen clarified, he wasn't suicidal, he valued his life and only pretended recklessness to make an impression. Captain Lorenzo acknowledged the proposal and promised to bring it to the higher command. Despite resistance from others, Lorenzo assured it would be his responsibility alone. Silently, Hazen reflected on the lieutenant's incompetence and his own long-term ambitions. If peace with the Kumin tribe succeeded, Hazen stood to earn both prestige and special merit. The words "great special merit" left one officer stunned, his mind racing with ambition. Confirmation followed. If successful, Hazen would indeed receive the recognition. Mospiza protested instantly, insisting the merit should go to Captain Lorenzo instead. His rant grew louder, demanding the award go to someone of proper rank, not a junior officer. When asked directly, Mospiza shamelessly implied he deserved the reward for loyalty over actual achievement. Captain Lorenzo apologized for the earlier commotion, but Hazen dismissed it, focused on the mission's success. Seeing the opportunity, Hazen asked to have a personal discussion, which Lorenzo welcomed. He brought up the legendary strategist Jill Sasuzara, known for shaping the Empire's early days. The strategist once left behind a framework. Soldiers, he claimed, could be divided into 4 types. First were skilled warriors with strong will, ideal for leading on the front lines. Next soldier type included those lacking will or skill, used as disposable frontline fodder. Then came those who had will but lacked talent, often mistaken as deserving. For them, the strategist left a chilling directive: no redemption, no use. Kill them immediately, Hazen quoted, sending shock through the room with his cold delivery. With the report concluded, he bowed respectfully and exited, leaving Lorenzo in stunned silence. Hazen walked down the silent corridor, leaving behind an impression of cold, calculating authority. Holding up a fruit, Jan introduced basic words to the prisoners with a bright and focused expression. Irritated by Moko's light-hearted attitude, she demanded that he take her lessons more seriously. The captives teased her with playful remarks, but she remained firm and dismissive. Elsewhere, Hazen monitored her work quietly, noting her swift progress with approval. Beyond just language, Jan had already picked up on local customs and social behavior with surprising ease. Hazen quickly assessed the situation and determined the information gathered was enough to begin negotiations. While sipping tea, he calmly pointed out that someone else must be helping Jan with the Kumin language. Caught off guard, Jan tried to insist she had learned everything on her own. His explanation exposed the truth behind her speech patterns, leaving no room to argue. Eventually, she admitted a merchant had helped her, though Hazen assured her no punishment would follow. A merchant stood before Hazen, stating clearly that he only came to discuss business. Despite his casual tone, he admitted to being nervous when summoned, surprised to find such a young officer. Hazen confronted him directly, asking how he knew the Kumin language and taught it to Jan. The man dodged the question, dismissing Jan's words as childish exaggeration. In response, Hazen offered a written guarantee of immunity, ensuring honest cooperation without consequence. Hazen made it clear that the truth would be judged by him, not the speaker. Reluctantly, the merchant agreed to talk in exchange for the promised protection. He revealed that he had once dated a woman from the Kumin tribe and picked up the language during that time. Later, he chose Jan from an orphanage and taught her about the tribe's culture and crafts. Unmoved, Hazen pressed further, demanding to know the man's real motive behind all his actions. With a ceasefire near, the merchant expressed interest in launching trade with the Kumin tribe as soon as peace was secured. Though skeptical, Hazen explained that capturing a Kumin sorcerer provided a rare chance for negotiations. The merchant questioned the plan, wary of military control over post-war trade. He denied any intent to smuggle, insisting fair profit was his only goal. However, Hazen added a condition: Jan would decide the price, and he would hold first trade rights. The merchant cheerfully embraced Hazen, praising him, and accepting the trade proposal without hesitation. Jan immediately objected, declaring that Hazen was far from being a good man. Reflecting on his past, the merchant shared how a Kumin woman who taught him was executed for helping an imperial soldier. Though he had kept trading, regret lingered over the harsh consequences she faced. Hazen responded coldly, admitting his actions were solely driven by personal goals, nothing more. 3 days later, talks of peace began as the group approached the Kumin territory. One tribe member stated that any treaty would ultimately depend on their leader's decision. The escorting warriors remained cautious, watching closely as the visitors ascended the trail. Upon arrival, Hazen and his group were immediately surrounded by armed guards, though not surprised. As they entered the village, tension filled the air, yet Hazen understood their wary stares. Hazen introduced himself to the Kumin people, noting their willingness to guide them suggested an openness to negotiation. He expressed gratitude as they entered the ceremonial hall to meet the tribe's leader. Regal figure of Blue Queen Beixia greeted them, impressed by their language skills and knowledge of her culture. However, her tone shifted as she questioned whether they truly expected to leave alive. He remained composed, while the queen coolly offered execution options with a smile. Sensing danger, Yan instinctively began looking for a way to escape the tense chamber. As a spear was suddenly aimed at her, Hazen stepped in to protect her, drawing immediate attention. He criticized the guard's action, but the queen dismissed his concern as weakness. While Hazen acknowledged her view, he made it clear the Empire would use any means to conquer. To shift the conversation, he revealed his analysis of a captured Kumin mage's staff, silencing the queen. Hazen revealed that the Kumin territory held natural deposits of magical gems, still hidden from the Empire. Queen Beixia questioned his secrecy, warning such knowledge could ignite wars between nations. To her shock, Hazen boldly declared his desire to keep the gems for himself. As tensions peaked, he offered a wand and asked to be judged only after examining it. Though cautious, Beixia inspected the wand, sensing its high quality but unsure of its true significance. Queen Beixia questioned how a soldier like Hazen could craft wands, despite the Empire's exclusive control. He confessed he stole the technique and trained secretly, constrained by cost and regulations. Outlining his plan, Hazen explained the tribe desired magic wands, while he sought magical gems in return. Beixia realized he couldn't openly sell to the Empire without consequences. A mutual exchange was proposed: wands for gems, away from imperial oversight. Queen Beixia questioned Hazen's loyalty, wondering if his plan betrayed his country. With a calm smile, Hazen admitted he served only his own ambitions, not the Empire's. Intrigued, Beixia acknowledged him as a man unlike most Imperials. She conceded his reasoning, admitting the tribe could no longer survive without adapting to the growing threats. Though Hazen pressed for an answer, she advised patience, hinting her decision would come soon. Queen Beixia declared that only strength earned trust among warriors, then summoned her champion, Oribibes. She revealed he was the tribe's second strongest and ordered him to face Hazen in a test of worth. The duel was announced, and the crowd erupted in support, confident in Oribib's past victories. With an icy dragon summoned, Oribibes warned Hazen of its fierce power. As the beast lunged, he urged Hazen not to disappoint the queen. Hazen was struck back by the dragon's power and acknowledged his current magic wasn't enough. Without hesitation, he activated a complex spell formation, catching his opponent completely off guard. Hazen unveiled an ominous power, knowing that shadow beasts alone weren't enough to win. He stood as a rare anomaly, someone who lived on both continents and mastered two distinct magical arts. While the Western system relied on chants and seals, the Eastern continent used magic wands for swift casting. With knowledge of both systems, Hazen chose the faster path, becoming a formidable force. Though his start was from scratch, his magic overwhelmed even elite warriors. The enemy launched a massive ice attack, confident that inferior wands wouldn't change the outcome. In response, Hazen conjured a dense earth barrier that withstood the crushing force. Shocked by the defense, the opponent questioned how such power resisted a dragon's breath. Instead of retreating, Hazen prepared to counter, dual-wielding magic wands with flawless control. Only legends like Mishiru were known to achieve such a rare magical feat. A blazing streak ripped through the sky as Hazen unleashed the power of Gurren. The ice dragon, once considered invincible, shattered under the force of the strike. With Gurren's single-use focus, the wand amplified his attack beyond normal limits. While the enemy braced for another blow, uncertainty crept into his expression. Despite the display, the opponent declared a resurrection plan fueled by endless mana. Dark restraints suddenly bound the warrior, interrupting the duel and causing confusion. From afar, Hazen calmly controlled the spell, channeling magic through a distant wand. Exploiting a moment of distraction, he closed in and criticized the enemy's Na Fei with. With the battle turning in his favor, Hazen questioned his opponent's resolve. A final verdict was given, and Hazen declared the superiority of wielding multiple wands. Using a self-crafted ring wand named Gento, Hazen concealed his weapons effortlessly, though he dismissed the technique as a minor trick. Others recognized it as an astonishing feat. He offered to share his vast arsenal of magical tools, revealing his methods as proof. Acknowledging Hazen's strength, the opposing leader chose alliance over enmity. Together, they declared a ceasefire, uniting both sides in a historic agreement. Voices fell silent as the leader's command left no room for dissent. Despite the silence, lingering resentment toward the Empire stirred within the crowd. Acknowledging past losses and gains, the chief proposed peace over endless struggle. A glass was offered in celebration, Yet hesitation arose over dulled clarity. Before protest could grow, a companion eagerly volunteered to handle the drinking. Accusations flew as the child stirred chaos at the celebration, doing more harm than help. Laughter echoed when her antics sparked questions about her parentage and purpose. Plans for her future were laid out. She'd serve as a trade mediator to learn diplomacy. Doubt surfaced over her age and size, yet her presence alone impressed the clan leader. Misleading fear and youthful appearance concealed a capable 13-year-old with sharp wit. Joy filled the air as mutual respect sealed the bond with shared words and smiles. Two mugs collided in a celebratory toast, marking a new beginning. While laughter echoed, hearty meals and endless mugs of ale brought energy to the feast. Festivities carried into the night, with song, dance, and the glow of peace across the mountains. By morning, news of the ceasefire stunned the empire. The mission was a success. Tao finalized the peace. Queen Basia would soon arrive, despite skepticism about forged reports. Attempts to shift blame and control the narrative were quickly challenged by prior orders. Delusions of recognition swelled as the officer dreamed of accolades for others' work. Frustration mounted. Not only had he obstructed progress, now he sought credit. Feigning modesty, he shamelessly suggested his unit deserved honor, despite their misconduct. Fault for the platoon's behavior was turned back on its supposed supervisor with sharp logic. Attempts to deflect blame while demanding rewards were swiftly dismantled. Faced with reason, the officer scrambled to justify his position with flimsy excuses. Words lost strength as truth cut through efforts from others had been non-existent. With authority, disciplinary action was declared, leaving no room for further deceit. An enraged outburst was met with nothing but a fluttering insect. One swift gesture from Hazen sent the officer sprawling to the floor. Advancing calmly, he dismissed the chaos as pest control, a necessary purge for the Empire's future. Feigning composure, the officer scrambled to reassert control, but permission was already granted to leave. Orders from the captain backed Hazen's authority, silencing further protest with cold finality. Demanding clarity, the superior insisted on hearing the report before it was delivered. Unamused, Hazen confirmed he would follow the captain's exact orders if reluctantly. Outrage flared when phrasing didn't match expectations, even though the intent remained intact. Unwilling to compromise, the officer forced a rehearsal, determined to script the moment. Interruptions struck just as tempers peaked, halting the farce before it spiraled further. Captain Lorenzo arrived unexpectedly, clearly fed up with the noise. Shock rippled through the room as he exposed the manipulative scheme laid bare. He'd been present since the start, silently listening out of respect for the chain of command. Rage turned toward Hazen, the scapegoat for the unraveling mess. Calm and calculated, Hazen admitted he orchestrated it, though the outcome exceeded his expectations. A decision was declared: the disgraced officer would face demotion, and Hazen's rise would be formalized. With an eerie smile, Hazen assured them he'd eliminate every parasite threatening the Empire's integrity. Panic took over as the condemned man begged desperately, knowing what that meant. Though the promotion was unofficial, Lorenzo granted Hazen full authority, if only temporarily. As a final gesture, the ex-lieutenant was reassigned under Hazen. Hazen pointed out the ex-lieutenant's abusive behavior, volunteering to keep him in line within his own unit. With a chilling smile, he promised not revenge, but a complete dismantling of the man's corrupted spirit. Reduced to a trembling wreck, the former officer realized his fate was now sealed by fear and guilt. Recognition came swiftly. Hazen's promotion to first lieutenant was confirmed after just a month. Uninterested in titles, Hazen pressed forward, eyes fixed on the next mission already unfolding. Curious, Lorenzo asked what Hazen meant by the next step. Returning quietly, Hazen was greeted by familiar voices waiting inside the room. Comfort filled the space, where warm smiles and a sleeping companion reminded him of peace. After a long journey, rest was well earned, especially for someone so small and tired. But the calm wouldn't last. The next mission loomed: a war against the Duchy of Diordo. A high-ranking officer announces the start of war against the Duchy of Diordo. As tension settles in, one of the women voices concern over the sudden conflict, while a girl named Yan is gently awakened. Yan receives a sealed letter with instructions to deliver it to Queen Basia. Later, Yan reports on a successful trade involving Magatama, noting that more precious jewels are expected soon. The officer commends the clever tactic of hiding jewels inside Magatama. Yan hesitantly brings up the war she overheard, her expression filled with concern as unease settles in. One of the women clarifies that the idea was merely a suggestion. The strategist points to the map, emphasizing the urgency of striking before the ceasefire becomes public knowledge. He argues that the enemy faces the same difficulties, and an early move remains viable. A senior officer acknowledges his skill, but but reminds him of a dangerous figure defending the enemy fortress. General Gazar, a formidable warrior wielding lightning magic, is introduced as a major threat stationed at the duchy's fortress. The officer acknowledges the rarity of lightning mages and notes the notoriety of other powerful figures like Marquis Mishiru. They are expected to gain reinforcements from Mishiru within months. Seeing resistance, the strategist withdraws, recognizing further persuasion would be futile for now. Still, he believes that striking with even a small unit is exactly why action must be taken. The officer reflects on the surprising shift in the decade-long stalemate, recognizing the impact their efforts have made. A sly grin crosses his face as he contemplates the outcome, questioning whether to release someone as expected. Training begins at the 8th ground, though the recruits appear far from ready for real battle. One trainee fails to even mount a horse, much to the strategist's growing frustration. Despite his incompetence, the man's noble birth shields him from dismissal. Frustrated by the man's incompetence, the officer considers eliminating him, deeming his presence a burden on the unit. With a swift strike, he draws blood, shocking everyone with the sudden burst of violence. Despite being of lower birth, he asserts the importance of military rank over nobility in a strict tone. The wounded noble threatens retribution, vowing that his family will demand harsh punishment. Another officer calmly dismantles his threats, exposing his social failures and lack of real status. Trembling noble demands justification for the harsh claims made against him. Meanwhile, the officer calmly explains his reasoning, highlighting his duty to consider the well-being of subordinates unable to return home. Overwhelmed, the noble expresses disbelief that someone like him would be held accountable by a lower-born officer. Despite lacking concrete proof, the officer asserts that the noble's reliance on connections and flattery is obvious, questioning how anyone could take pride in calling him family. Silence falls as the disgraced noble kneels, his humiliation witnessed by others in the shadows. He reacts in disbelief at the suggestion of being reduced to a slave. The officer reminds him of the deaths he caused, pointing out how quickly he plays the victim when powerless. Presenting documented orders from the executed Sergeant Chomo, he exposes the noble's detailed involvement. With a sigh, he questions the noble's ignorance, noting how everyone had simply kept quiet about his crimes. Faced with public shame, the disgraced noble begs for mercy, claiming remorse as onlookers watch silently. Hazen, unfazed, hands over a book to Sergeant Buzz and walks away, instructing the sergeant to use the diary for discipline. Hazen calmly states he'll return to his room. Hazen adds that if the man nears death, he should be brought back for healing repeatedly, if needed. Meanwhile, others worry about Hazen's state of mind, sensing that things may spiral beyond control. Hazen insists he has worries like anyone, surprising the two girls with his rare expression of emotion. From the window, they observe the training grounds while pondering the practical uses of a magically bound slave. Rifa reflects on how her path was also shaped by others, drawing parallels to current events with quiet resignation. Despite her past, Rifa remains kind-hearted, showing a gentleness rare in their harsh environment. She desperately needs someone who truly understands her. Jan silently interprets Riefa's expression, while Hazen reflects on being someone like her. Riefa protests being called a rookie, asserting that they're from the same generation. Hazen admits he often forgets to exclude the age he carries from a previous life. Recognizing the vast skill gap, he jokes about having experience akin to a century-old veteran, amused by the thought. The group breaks into laughter and chatter, while Hazen teases them about working for another 2,000 years. Argid Fortress of the Duchy of Diordo stands guarded by elite armored soldiers and a magic barrier, rendering it nearly impenetrable. Gazar's demotion is hinted at, tied to an impulsive strike against a government minister. Seated in contemplation, General Gazar reflects on his fall from grace. He justifies his outburst, blaming the minister's greed and incompetence for provoking him. Bored by peace, Gazar wishes for an imperial attack to relieve the monotony. An attendant rushes in, causing a stir. Gazar assumes it might be news of battle, but it's something else. He's informed that someone wishes to speak with him privately, which immediately grabs his attention. A wicked grin forms as Gazar senses potential entertainment in the encounter. Eager for a distraction, he leaps at the chance, curious whether it's a betrayal or a trap. The mysterious visitor reveals himself as an officer from the Empire. A shadowy figure demands the assassination of both Captain Lorenzo and Hazenheim without hesitation. News arrives at the Argid Fortress Mishiru of the Four Counts is approaching. General Gazar gathers the commanders, citing proof of a ceasefire and imperial caravans moving through tribal lands. Ignoring diplomacy, Gazar declares war. Commander Nidal responds with excitement, eager to fight. Calm voices intervene. Commander Noyudata urges a full explanation, and Lanbru begins reporting earlier movements. Privately, Gazar learns Maisharu's army will strike in a month to capture Argid Fortress. Gazar carefully inspects a document presented as evidence of treachery. Lanbru, receiving the paper, agrees to forward it to the intelligence department for verification. Confronting a captured traitor, Gazar demands to know why an imperial officer would betray the empire. In a burst of emotion, the prisoner rants about Hazenheim, a newly appointed second lieutenant. The man claims Hazen initiated a ceasefire and sparked the campaign against Argid Fortress. Lanbru is stunned that a low-ranking officer could achieve so much. While Gazar considers the implications of the document, another voice questions the traitor's motives. Motivated by revenge, the man demands the deaths of Hazen and Captain Lorenzo, revealing deeper plans. With confidence, Gazar agrees to the deal, promising to handle the assassination himself. His ally erupts with laughter, convinced Hazenheim's downfall is now certain. A relaxed posture and confident tone set the tone as the situation is explained to those assembled. Requesting 50,000 reinforcements from Ganadoraru is proposed without hesitation, despite the heavy implications. Excitement builds as a bold plan emerges: capture the fortress within 10 days. Concerns over the Kumin tribe surface, but a minimal force is deemed sufficient to hold them off. Battle spirit surges, armor clanks as fists tighten with determination. Cheers erupt as relief spreads. Hazen's plan has backfired, thanks to a timely whistleblower. Mocking laughter follows as promises made to traitors are dismissed without hesitation. Alarms rise at northern Garna Fortress. Enemy forces have already approached nearby villages. Hopes fade fast as internal command fractures and Borosog's unit retreats. With limited troops remaining, all eyes turn toward one final plan for survival. Two officers arrive urgently, announcing their presence without delay. In a dim council chamber, high-ranking officials sit in judgment, waiting for an explanation. Suspicion rises as questions target the timing and reasoning behind their appearance. News of Borosog's retreat shifts the mood, offering a political opportunity for accusation. Confident and sharp, Hazen declares his intent to bring down General Gazar and shatter enemy forces. Dismissal comes swiftly as the colonel mocks the bold proposal and questions the reason for their presence. Doubt clashes with confident strength, not words, earned the Kumin tribe's respect and peace. A stalled command at the front lines leaves critical decisions in limbo. Definitions differ where some see a mage as a tool, others see one who makes the impossible real. Only two paths remain: trust and fight, or flee and be remembered as a coward. Victory is the only currency that defines a soldier's worth in battle. A gloved hand reaches forward, offering a quiet but firm promise. With unwavering eyes, Hazen leans in, vowing to fulfill what others cannot. Mockery from senior officers erupts, dismissing bold strategy as naïve ambition. Despite criticism, Hazen assures them if given command, he will deliver an unimaginable victory. With conviction, Lorenzo steps forward, offering his authority to Hazen without hesitation. No longer held back, Hazen's presence is likened to a storm crashing into the heart of the fortress. Within days, his actions reveal cracks in leadership, exposing failures old and new. Disgrace after disgrace has left morale fractured and dignity eroded. Even surrendering a command seat feels small compared to becoming what they've all come to despise. No tolerance remains. Failure means death, declared without hesitation. In contrast, success earns exile, a quiet reward cloaked in forced departure. A formal order is given: transfer full authority to Hazen for the coming battle. With a steady tone, Lorenzo affirms the decision and passes on his rank. No pride remains, only a deep bow and a single plea to protect the fortress. With full authority granted, Hazen accepts the burden. Lorenzo bows, entrusting him with the fortress's fate. Assigned under Hazen's command, the young officer asked what duties awaited him. Rather than strict orders, Hazen appointed Captain Lorenzo to maintain contact with higher command. Surprised, the officer expected a lesson in etiquette, not such informal treatment. While formality was required in public, Hazen expressed a preference for their usual casual exchange in private. Baffled, the officer found it hard to believe Hazen had spoken of respect so sincerely. Facing a massive disadvantage, the officers discussed strategy as 15,000 men prepared to resist an army over 3 times their size. With their enemy led by the fearsome General Gazar, Hazen boldly declared his intent to strike first. Knowing his proposal would pass, he instructed Lorenzo to lead in his absence. Using his magical skill, Hazen planned to distract the enemy away from the fortress. Despite lingering distrust, Hazen acknowledged Lorenzo's strength lay in his critical thinking. Troop movements were uncertain, and Hazen requested Lorenzo's flexibility in reinforcing any direction under attack. Despite the clear strategy, Lorenzo voiced doubts, worried about facing the powerful cavalry of Diordo. In response, Hazen advised deploying Resefa, hinting at her unique effectiveness in battle. Acknowledging the advice, Lorenzo accepted the plan with quiet determination. Later, Hazen challenged Lorenzo's assumptions, pressing him to reflect on what defines a true superior. Lorenzo struggled to identify the trait Hazen valued most in a leader, listing judgment, forgiveness, and evaluation. Hazen revealed it was the ability to listen to subordinates and recognize true talent even if unpopular. With humility, Hazen admitted his own flaws and requested Lorenzo's strength in return. Though caught off guard, Lorenzo acknowledged Hazen's gift for winning people over. Their agreement sealed with a handshake. Lorenzo pledged his support without hesitation. As battle day arrived, the enemy's thunderous march shook the defenders. Fear gripped the soldiers, some collapsing in panic. The fortress brimmed with dread, yet Hazen continued giving orders amid the uncertainty. A cheerful knight approached Hazen with gratitude, his presence breaking through the gloom. When asked about his resolve, the knight confidently affirmed faith in Hazen's leadership. Even against 50,000 foes, the knight declared, they would endure without hesitation. Though Hazen warned of facing the famed General Gazar, the knight remained confident in their lieutenant's strength, accepting the risk of war. The troops stood firm, recalling Hazen's own words on the cost of battle. In a quiet moment, Hazen reflected on the harsh reality of a soldier's life. Suddenly a voice echoed across the fortress walls, capturing everyone's attention. Using a magic staff, the enemy commander began a broadcast, startling the Empire's ranks. The enemy declared the battle would conclude in 3 days, warning deserters would face death. Tension gripped the fortress. Hazen raised his voice, promising a way through the darkness. Lorenzo echoed the vow, urging everyone to endure and hold out until rescue arrived. With trust in their bodies, training, and comrades, the soldiers began to regain their spirit. Commanding the wall, Hazen called for unity as troops roared in defiance. Hazen's rare display of passion stirred surprise among the officers, as he openly admitted his distrust of most leaders. Though it wasn't like him, he confessed, he couldn't bear to lose certain comrades. With a quick handoff, Hazen entrusted the task to Resefa. Brushing off her remarks about his honesty, he rode off, confident that Lorenzo could lead better with morale already rising. Left behind, Resefa sighed, feeling sympathy for the captain now burdened with command. General Gazar stood before his disciplined army, his reputation commanding respect across the continent. With troops fully deployed, the battlefield stretched wide under looming tension. He unveiled his strategy, an aggressive thrust aimed straight through the enemy center, fueling the flames. Gazar rallied his men with a call for revenge, vowing retribution against the Empire. As morale surged, he gave the signal to charge, unaware of the resistance awaiting them ahead. General Gazar was stunned as an unexpected roar echoed from the enemy's side. Despite their small numbers, the Imperial soldiers radiated fierce morale, shaking the confidence of Gazar's men. He began to suspect Hazen's influence, recalling rumors of his leadership. Though advised to adapt, Gazar insisted on an all-out offensive from the start. Wary of the legendary 4 counts, he feared the tide might yet turn against them. The Imperial soldiers braced themselves, knowing a weak attack would only embolden the enemy's hope. Determined to strike hard, Gazar's troops advanced with full force, weapons clashing as they moved. Archers unleashed a volley while cavalry surged forward with cries to crush the defenders entirely. Arrows rained down, forcing the Empire's shield units into tight formation amid rising tension. Watching from above, Hazen acknowledged the battle's toll. Small forces couldn't afford even minor losses. Disguised in enemy clothing, Hazen used the chaos of battle to move undetected across the field. He noted the quality of the Principality's gear while adjusting to the stolen uniform. Nearby, the Archer Corps commander barked orders, steadying his unit's fire under pressure. Hazen slipped into position, watching closely as the enemy praised their stable front line. With a single strike, he took down the enemy commander, plunging their archers into confusion. Assassination of the Archer commander spread panic, and he planned to ignite chaos further with fire back at headquarters. Lorenzo received news that the enemy's Archer assault was losing strength. Seizing the momentum, Lorenzo rallied his troops to maintain pressure until nightfall, praising Hazen's success. On the wall, their forces adjusted swiftly, redirecting troops west to hold the advantage. From afar, Gazar questioned the shift, unsure if they faced a stalemate or something worse. Gazar considered deploying mages, but hesitated, noticing instead a strange warrior beside Lorenzo, who drew his attention. Moments later, a devastating attack ripped through the field, scattering enemy forces in panic. The destruction left Gazar impressed, though even his aide was overwhelmed by the scale of damage. A sudden commotion interrupted him as a rider rushed in with urgent news. Shock followed. His Archer commander had been assassinated, turning the battlefield's tide. The enemy deduced that the fallen commander had been struck down by exploiting his magical vulnerability. Speculation rose: was Hazen truly an assassin mage operating with lethal precision? As the sun dipped below the mountains, Gazar ordered a retreat, signaling the day's end. He knew Hazen couldn't dominate large-scale battles if given time to regroup. With a grin, he summoned cavalry commander Nidel, preparing for an overwhelming strike at dawn. Hazen returned to base after a covert mission that shifted the tide of battle. His actions stunned his fellow officer, who questioned how he achieved such a feat unnoticed. Despite the compliment, Hazen reminded him that nothing came easy in hostile territory. He revealed the enemy general was merely a decoy, and tomorrow's battlefront would shift drastically. With tasks reassigned, Hazen departed, urging his captain to rest. That night, Hazen observed the wounded, quietly relieved the damage was minimal. Hazen entered the infirmary, surveying the wounded. Buzz confirmed more injured remained elsewhere. Without hesitation, Hazen ordered all of them to be gathered immediately for treatment. Determined to restore strength to the unit, he vowed to heal every soldier using his magic. Despite concerns about his stamina, Hazen assured them he'd manage by conserving energy. He reminded Buzz of leadership's burden, doing more than those who serve beneath. Hazen reflected on his role, acknowledging that some officers saw command as mere privilege without responsibility. He criticized incompetence masked by rank, warning that such arrogance would eventually expose itself. With calm resolve, he reminded Buzz that his presence wasn't permanent, offering his words as guidance. Returning to the topic, Hazen stated he was simply fulfilling his duty as a leader. Moved by his sincerity, Buzz expressed admiration, catching Hazen slightly off guard. Hazen calmly dismissed the praise, insisting admiration wasn't necessary. He emphasized that fulfilling one's role was enough, believing a disciplined unit would naturally become stronger. Buzz, however, stood firm, declaring his respect for Hazen's rare sense of duty and integrity. The next morning, Buzz cheerfully resolved to act on his own terms, amusing Hazen with his enthusiasm. From the tower, Hazen observed the battlefield, entrusting the west to Captain Riefa's command. With unwavering focus, Hazen reminded himself of his mission. His target was the enemy's central cavalry, a key force pushing into their lines. The opposing charge hit hard, overwhelming the front line and shaking the morale of nearby troops. Realizing the enemy's strength, Hazen acknowledged their advantage and prepared his next move. He unleashed Ground's Fury, a gravity-based spell aimed at collapsing the enemy formation. Enemy soldiers spotted Hazen atop the wall and panicked, ordering archers to fire. To their disbelief, volleys of arrows failed to land, neutralized before reaching their mark. One commander, realizing the difference in strength, urged his cavalry to retreat. Recognizing Hazen, the enemy confirmed his identity, surprised by his presence. Before the duel began, the knight requested to verify Hazen's rumored skill with multiple staves. When asked about a fallen commander, Hazen confirmed he had eliminated the archer leader to weaken enemy tactics. His opponent trembled with emotion, revealing the slain commander was his closest friend. Fueled by grief and rage, the knight vowed vengeance, adding personal hatred to the battlefield. Raising his enchanted weapon, he prepared for a serious confrontation. Suddenly, dozens of blades surged toward Hazen, signaling the duel's brutal beginning. Hazen quickly recognized the vast telekinetic weapon array as the work of Needle's cavalry, enhanced by support from the rear infantry. He narrowly dodged a swarm of magically controlled blades, each strike coming with deadly precision. The enemy was shocked to see Hazen maneuver freely in the air. Explained his technique, a clever combination of levitation and wind-based tools enabling pseudo-flight. Unfazed, the cavalry commander declared the relentless weapons would chase Hazen without end. Hazen activated Wind Roar, unleashing a powerful gust that scattered the incoming blades. As the weapons struck the ground, it became clear they lacked the weight to be truly effective. In response, the enemy conjured a massive boulder, hurling it toward Hazen with devastating force. Realizing its overwhelming mass, Hazen knew his wind magic couldn't deflect it. He swiftly maneuvered, narrowly avoiding destruction as the ground split behind him. Hazen revealed his next weapon, Steel Slash, a wand designed to cut through solid matter with ease. Confident and composed, he challenged his opponent to surrender if no further moves remained. Summoning chilling power, he invoked Permafrost Horizon, freezing the battlefield around him. The enemy began to tremble, confused by the unnatural cold spreading through the air. With a final strike, Hazen shattered the frozen zone, ending the confrontation decisively. A powerful wand, once used by a warrior of the Kumin tribe, was brought into play, boasting unmatched magical output. Responding swiftly, the infantry unleashed full strength, summoning a massive burst of magical energy that shook the battlefield. Clashing head-on, Both sides engaged at close range with force and fury. Amid the chaos, Noyuta fell, his body left motionless on the ground. Laughter masked the grief, but the commander's legs finally gave out beneath him. Despite the overwhelming power on display, Hazen showed little concern when warned about General Gazar's might. With cold finality, he declared his parting words, leaving a defeated opponent, kneeling among fallen blades. A weary breath escaped as the long battle took its toll. Buzz rushed in, offering support, while the army surged forward, spurred by victory. Relief was short-lived. Success hinged now on the situation at the West Gate. Commanders at the West Gate dismissed the enemy's advance, believing their forces held the upper hand. Major Zymant echoed the overconfidence, laughing alongside the others. Lorenzo arrived unexpectedly, only to be met with hostility and scorn, despite his official assignment. At the West Gate, Lorenzo weighed his orders, uncertain how to proceed despite Hazen's confidence in him. Arrogant officers nearby dismissed the situation, joking about easy victories and promotions. Suddenly, distant rumbling caught Lorenzo's attention. Dust clouds signaled incoming movement across the plain. An enemy rider appeared alone, boldly approaching the fortress and hurling a public challenge. With a fierce grin, the warrior mocked the Imperial forces, demanding a battle worth his time. The enemy's insult stirred outrage among the officers, but Lorenzo reminded them of the strict order to avoid single combat. Despite the warning, others questioned his loyalty and mocked the idea of failure, dismissing his caution entirely. Without waiting for consensus, Makazalu rallied the troops, eager to secure glory through brute strength. He marched out to confront the challenger, ignoring all concerns and protocol. Standing firm, Makazalu introduced himself and challenged General Gazar to a one-on-one duel. General Gazar revealed his weapon, the Thundercutter Peacock, displaying it with calm confidence. Lorenzo recognized the weapon's name, knowing it was a powerful artifact crafted by elite artisans. Makazalu launched his attack with a roar, unleashing a massive blow using his own named weapon. Without hesitation, Gazar grabbed him mid-charge, unimpressed, and declared the end before the fight had truly begun. In a single overwhelming motion, Gazar crushed his opponent and dropped him lifeless before the stunned Imperial soldiers. Lightning flashed as Gazar stood surrounded by crackling energy, his enemies stunned by the speed of his strike. Fear took hold. Some officers collapsed in panic, their confidence shattered by the overwhelming display. Desperation set in as a commander ordered the full army to charge. Captain Buys, realizing the danger too late, panicked and tried to flee the battlefield. Chaos followed as he shoved past his own troops, ignoring discipline in a frantic scramble for safety. As the front line charged, several soldiers froze in fear, trembling under Gazar's quiet gaze. From a distance, Lorenzo watched in confusion as the troops hesitated mid-advance, forming disorganized clusters. Appearing suddenly behind Buys, Gazar's chilling presence erased any hope of escape. In a single strike, he crippled the fleeing officer, criticizing his cowardice and hypocrisy without raising his voice. Begging for mercy, Buys dragged himself backward. But the outcome had already been decided. Buys, desperate to survive, offered to open the West Gate in exchange for his life. But Gazar struck him down without hesitation. Nearby officers recoiled in fear, unable to act as the situation collapsed further. Panic surged as Major Simon screamed for a full retreat, abandoning all formality. He dashed toward the gate, demanding it be opened to secure an escape route. Despite his frantic orders, soldiers hesitated, torn between following commands or preserving the fortress. Lorenzo held back Major Simon, warning him that opening the gate would doom them all. Outside the fortress, Gazar signaled his forces. With grim smiles, the enemy army surged forward. As panic spread, Lorenzo realized the troops were frozen with fear and leadership had crumbled. Just then, Riefa stepped in confidently, assuring Lorenzo to leave the situation to her, with determination. She activated her powerful armor technique, unleashing a wave of mechanical energy forward. Encased in full armor, Riefa stood transformed, her body radiating with raw, defensive power. The enemy charge faltered as Gazar sensed the threat and questioned the source of her magic. One soldier rushed ahead confidently, unaware of the danger that lay before him. In an instant, Riefa struck him down, her armor's strength overwhelming his speed and sword. Rattled by the blow, Gazar ordered his elite armored troops to step in and regroup. Lorenzo watched in disbelief as heavily armored enemy units marched forward, clad in rare Madoma steel. Without delay, Riefa countered with crushing force, breaking through their ranks with relentless strikes. Gazar's expression hardened, unsettled by the strength of her weapon and the source of her power. She lifted her massive blade with ease, ready to challenge the entire front. Onlookers stood speechless as her wild, unorthodox combat overwhelmed soldiers on all sides. Excited by Reifa's strength, the officers celebrated Hazen's hidden trump card. Unaware of deeper risks, Lorenzo voiced caution, but Simon dismissed him, obsessed with claiming the credit for victory. Seeing the reckless behavior, Lorenzo wondered if Hazen had anticipated their downfall all along. Realizing more lives could be lost, Reifa rushed forward to prevent further collapse. Gazar intercepted with fierce speed, initiating a sudden clash to halt her advance. Reifa endured Gazar's fierce assault, her armor showing signs of stress but refusing to break. Their clash intensified. Gazar, now intrigued by her resilience, prepared to unleash even greater force. On the battlefield before the Western Gate, two noble officers mockingly taunt the armored enemy, dismissing him as weak and insignificant. Suddenly, a warrior charges forward with great speed and power, acknowledging the strain it takes but determined to act. As energy erupts around him, the warrior unleashes a powerful technique, Dancing Peacock, flooding the area with a radiant and overwhelming force. Breathing heavily, he approaches the stunned opponent and restrains him with a final burst of energy, halting his movement. With exhaustion setting in, he raises his hand in victory, declaring the Western Gate secured as the armored figure collapses. A deafening roar erupted as the armored warrior unleashed a massive shockwave, shaking the ground and forcing nearby soldiers to brace themselves. Amused by the chaos, a grinning officer pointed ahead, proudly boasting about the Empire's firepower while ordering the total annihilation of the enemy forces. Without protest, the warrior commander signaled retreat, his troops quietly falling back in the face of overwhelming odds. Under a silent sky, the remaining enemy confirmed the withdrawal, offering reassurance to an ally who stood motionless after the clash. Just as calm returned, a sudden impact shattered the moment, prompting Hazen's subordinate to leap forward and shield him from a surprise attack. A wounded Reifa activated her final technique, Liberation, causing a surge of power to ripple through the battlefield as her body trembled from the strain. Moments later, her strength gave out, and she collapsed into Hazen's arms, her form limp and scorched from the effort. Conscious, Reifa looked up at Hazen, whispering his name as her vision blurred and her breath weakened. With a gentle expression, Hazen reassured her of her valor, acknowledging her sacrifice as the key to protecting the fortress. A faint smile crossed her face. Through labored breaths, Reifa celebrated her survival and the mission's success. Seeing Reifa's condition worsen, Hazen quickly called for a stretcher while others hesitated, fearful of approaching the injured warrior. One officer stepped forward, offering to carry her, but Hazen's voice cut in sharply, questioning their lack of urgency and gratitude. Fixing them with a cold glare, Hazen demanded action, leaving no room for further delay or excuses. At last, the soldiers moved to lift Reifa carefully, as Hazen turned to face a group reporting on the Western Gate's dire state. The other officer apologized, noting the fear Reifa's devastating power had instilled in their own troops. One who halted General Gazar and repelled the duchy's forces was none other than Reifa, her power undeniable and decisive. Hazen clenched his fist, unable to comprehend the soldiers' fear. To him, even a dog remembered kindness. Humans had no excuse. Turning to the troops, he reminded them of their own families, their reasons to fight, and questioned how they'd feel being labeled monsters themselves. Without waiting for replies, Hazen walked away, urging them to reflect on their words and judgment. Later, faced with a mocking superior, Hazen coldly rebuked the insult toward Reifa, defending her legacy without hesitation, boasting credit for the victory. The officer downplayed Reifa's role, instead praising the battalions and preparing to report this version to Colonel Guidal. Hazen, unimpressed, challenged the claim. He warned that Reifa would not be deployed if her contribution wasn't acknowledged, leaving defense to their units. While the officer panicked at the implications, Hazen calmly permitted him to proceed however he wished, knowing the weight of accountability would follow. The accusation struck deep, and Hazen's pointed remarks left the officer flustered, exposed in his hypocrisy. Cornered, the man trembled in fear, forced to accept that without Reifa, their chances of survival were bleak. In desperation, the officer finally admitted fault and pleaded to use Reifa in the next battle, stumbling over her name. Hazen wasn't moved. With a calm yet cold gaze, he pointed out the officer's arrogance, noting how high his head still remained. Demanding sincerity, Hazen watched as the man threw himself to the floor, begging with trembling voice for Reifa's support once more. Just as the plea seemed accepted, Hazen lifted his boot, offering no relief in his expression. He struck him down, delivering his answer with force, a decisive, unflinching number still groveling. The officer was stunned as Hazen demanded an even greater price to bring the Emperor himself to bow if they wanted Reifa. The atmosphere turned crushing. Hazen stood above him, a symbol of unforgiving dominance, drowning the room in contempt and humiliation. With each stomp, he reminded the officer of his place, calling him nothing more than a squealing pig in uniform. Then came the ultimatum: accept Hazen's insubordination, and live or enforce rank, and be left to die by Gazar's hand. Cornered, the officer surrendered, begging Hazen to protect the fortress at any cost. Hazen laughed. Victory already his. With a twisted grin, Hazen forced the officer to admit the truth: he depended on an insubordinate's power to protect himself. Unrelenting, Hazen drove the point deeper with each stomp, demanding he confess his selfishness masked as patriotism. The scene was interrupted by a punch. Another officer, unable to watch further, struck Hazen and called out his cruelty. Tension shattered as the officer dragged the trembling superior away, shouting threats and vowing to report Hazen for misconduct. Outside the infirmary, Hazen touched his bruised face and apologized. Calm again, he acknowledged that the blow helped clear his mind. Beside Riefa's glowing, unconscious form, Hazen reassured a worried girl. Her injuries were grave, but her life was not in danger. Memories stirred within him. Long ago, someone had made the same sacrifice to protect what they loved, and he, blinded by fear, had called that person a monster. The man had crossed lines, lost his humanity, yet acted purely out of devotion. Still, Hazen branded him with judgment. Unable to match the man's power, Hazen chose to stop him, mistaking strength for madness. Even now, he couldn't forgive himself for condemning one who only sought to save others, haunted by the past. The officer confessed that Riefa reminded him of someone he once misunderstood, someone he had also called a monster. Despite barely knowing the fortress or its people, Riefa had risked her life for them. Seeing her dismissed brought a deep ache. Ashamed of his harsh words, Hazen asked that his earlier statements be forgotten, turning away with a quiet voice. But his companion smiled, reassuring him with a gentle pat. Everyone carries their humanity, even beneath steel and pride. Hazen then addressed the battalions directly, urging them to recognize Riefa's sacrifice and the disgraceful way they had treated her. Stood firm, ordering the soldiers to return, rest, and prepare. As their captain, it was both command and care. Though hesitant, the soldiers recognized the truth. Their presence changed nothing here. Riefa's battle was over. For now, Hazen reminded them with quiet gravity, Riefa, their strongest shield, was down. No one else could take their place on the front lines. Understanding dawned. To honor her sacrifice, they chose to fight not out of duty but gratitude. With a faint smile, Hazen acknowledged them. He expected only one thing: that they fight with unwavering resolve. Before departing, the soldiers were reminded that forgiveness had not been granted, but gratitude could still be earned. Their response was sincere, encouraged by the captain's words. Morale remained intact. Even the gruff soldier beside him admitted, being a soldier wasn't so bad after all. Eyes fixed ahead, determination burned quietly. Tomorrow they would bring General Gazar down without hesitation. At sunrise, Galna Fortress's central gate stood silent, calm before the storm. Two warriors met face to face. Gazar issued the challenge. Hazen accepted without a word. Before the duel began, Hazen calmly accepted the proposed wager, raising a finger to add one condition of his own. He declared that if victorious, Gazar would serve under him. The bold demand left the enemy visibly shaken. Hazen proposed a wager: victory would decide who serves whom. With a confident grin, the noble accepted, believing Hazen's challenge to be arrogant posturing. In response, Hazen flicked a coin into the air, calm and deliberate. His actions carried no trace of doubt. The spinning coin reflected their resolve to Hazen. This wasn't about pride, it was a foregone conclusion. Steel rang out as they charged. Hazen's precise movements overwhelmed his opponent in an instant. Noble was thrown back, shaken. Rumors of Hazen's skill had circulated before, but now, they were proven undeniably real. Hazen praised the noble's weapon, but remained unfazed. His strength lay in adapting mid-battle, wielding multiple magic staves with ease. The noble, impressed by Hazen's feats, acknowledged his power. Hazen's reputation had already spread. His staff, once shattered enchanted armor, feared across the realm. With a calm expression, Hazen made his stance clear. He vowed to surpass his opponent using only a single staff. His rival accepted the challenge. A fair fight would settle the question of superiority. Drawing his blade, the noble readied himself. Hazen introduced his staff, magnetic flash marking the true start of their duel. Hazen revealed his trump card, a magic staff forged to surpass the Thundercutter Peacock. Determination lit his eyes as his weapon began to glow. With a surge of lightning, his opponent lunged forward, confident in his overwhelming speed and power. Mid-charge, confusion struck. Hazen vanished in an instant, leaving only trailing echoes and a clean slash in his wake. The noble realized too late Hazen had predicted the trajectory. Swift Thunder's secret was exposed and rendered ineffective. Baffled, the noble looked on as Hazen dodged again. The advantage he once relied on was crumbling fast. With a light tap, Hazen appeared behind his stunned opponent, calmly pointing out the difference in speed. Realization hit the noble, couldn't even track Hazen's movements. By the time he reacted, the moment had already passed. He reflected inward. The issue wasn't his body's speed, it was his mind's ability to keep up with the fight, unwavering, questioned if the noble would finally surrender. His tone remained composed, not mocking, refusing to yield. The noble adjusted his strategy. Channeling all enhancements to his sight, he vowed to push on, even if outclassed. Hazen praised his opponent's strategy, then prepared to unleash the full potential of magnetic flash, with a confident smile. The battlefield lit up. Hazen had marked it the night before, enabling high-speed movement between yin and yang points he had placed throughout the terrain. Panic crept in as the noble realized Hazen's setup wasn't limited to the ground. Vertical space was part of the trap. Caught off guard, the noble discovered a mark behind him. A crushing strike followed before he could react. His weapon dropped as his body hit the ground. Hazen stood calmly, victorious once again, defeated and breathless. The noble admitted his loss. Hazen lowered his weapon, the battle now over. A faint smile formed as Hazen declared victory. From now on, General Gazar belonged to him. Gazar accepted the outcome without bitterness. It was a clean, undeniable defeat, one he could respect. Lying on his back, he looked to the sky. The fight may have ended in loss, but it was fought with honor. Despite his absence from the front, Gazar knew the Principality's forces would not falter. The next battle was already looming. Hazen, seated calmly outside the gate, declared with certainty that the enemy's advance would come to a halt. Shock rippled through the fortress as soldiers struggled to believe General Gazar had been defeated. For them, it seemed unthinkable. Orders rang out amid the confusion. Even with Gazar's fall, the Principality's troops were commanded to march forward without delay. Suddenly, panic erupted. The outer fortress had fallen. Messengers screamed for retreat as the ground cracked beneath them. Emerging from the chaos, the Kumin tribe made their entrance. Their leader scoffed at the lack of resistance. For her, it was dull. Soldiers spotted the Kumin invaders and sounded the alarm. Without hesitation, their leader responded with magic, shattering defenses with ease. Confusion spread among the ranks. A ceasefire had been in place. Why had the Kumin betrayed them now? The Kumin leader clarified coldly, there was no betrayal, only opportunity. The fault lay in the fortress being left defenseless. She addressed the Diordo army directly, surrender peacefully, and the frozen survivors would be spared. A chilling ultimatum followed. From the ramparts, Hazen observed the retreat. Though the Principality had withdrawn, he already planned the next move, Gazar's controlled capture. Gazar examined the contract, puzzled. He expected a military enlistment, but it was a magical master-servant pact instead. Hazen explained his reasoning. As an imperial soldier driven by personal goals, he had no loyalty to the empire itself. Suspicion grew. Gazar realized Hazen had manipulated the war's progression for his own gain far beyond what his young appearance suggested. When questioned, Hazen issued a warning. Some truths weren't meant to be uncovered. He offered advice instead. Accepting the terms with a smirk, Gazar signed. Whatever Hazen's age or origin, he wasn't someone to underestimate. The following day, the town celebrated. Food, drink, and music filled the air as soldiers enjoyed their hard-won peace. Inside the imperial chambers, the mood was colder. Hazen's order to summon the emperor sparked unease among high-ranking officers. Colonel Jidal burst into laughter at the audacity. His subordinate, nervous, reminded him of the seriousness of the situation. Jidal's grin sharpened. No deed could excuse Hazen's defiance. His challenge to the emperor's authority was punishable by death. With scheming smiles, the officers plotted Hazen's downfall. The timing was perfect. Those who fell from grace were easily erased. Behind closed doors, officers mocked Hazen. One joked that only begging and tears might save him but laughed off even that. Their insults escalated to cruel fantasies. Unaware Hazen overheard every word. He remained stoic, unmoved by their mockery. Outside, others awaited Hazen's presence at the celebration. One child gleefully showed him the food, but his expression stayed distant. He brushed off their concern. Though surrounded by cheer, his thoughts were elsewhere, calculating. Cautious, in the shadows, betrayal brewed. A traitor released Gazar in secret, plotting to frame Hazen for the escape. Just as the traitor believed his plan was complete, guards arrived. He froze in panic, under the lantern's light. The open cell and missing key told the story. Captain Lorenzo accused him of aiding Gazar's escape, forcing a clumsy denial. Hazen calmly suggested the traitor might be a spy. Lorenzo agreed and tasked Hazen with the arrest and recovery of Gazar. As Hazen walked away, the traitor chuckled in defeat, unaware Hazen had manipulated every move. With a rare smile, Hazen whispered, "Thanks." The scapegoat acted on cue just as he had planned all along. The traitor stood in disbelief, stammering as he tried to justify himself. His face paled under Hazen's gaze. Hazen calmly stepped forward, exposing the man's every secret. Gazar, watching silently, confirmed the betrayal. With the setup complete, Hazen gave Gazar his route of escape. Gazar nodded, understanding the silent alliance between them. Mockingly, Hazen reminded the traitor of his noble status. He'd survive execution but not disgrace. The cell door closed behind him. With a chilling smile, Hazen delivered the final blow. The man trembled, condemned to live as a bottom-tier slave. Soldiers buried the dead as screams echoed. Inside the fortress, daily life resumed with quiet normalcy. A commander reflected on their victory. The enemy was crushed, and opposition forces were gone. Suddenly, Hazen was summoned. Despite his achievements, he was placed under house arrest for defying imperial authority. Hazenheim was suddenly charged with lèse majesté by a superior officer and placed under house arrest. Without resistance, Hazen accepted the order. His face showed no emotion, masking whatever thoughts brewed within him. Outside the room, two officers sneered, mocking Hazen's apparent compliance. They believed he was clueless, unaware of the power plays against him. Another officer gloated cruelly, stressing that even a baseless charge like his could lead to execution. As the officer tried to provoke him further, Hazen remained unmoved. Calmly, he watched his tormentor degrade himself, unaffected and eerily composed in the face of insult. The smug officers circled Hazen with mock politeness, hinting they might grant favors if he begged. Their exaggerated gestures made their mockery clear. Calmly, Hazen turned and voiced a simple request. His tone was quiet, unfazed by their arrogance or theatrics. With composure, he pointed out the officer's foul breath, asking him to step back. His blunt honesty caught everyone off guard. Outraged by the lack of submission, one officer exploded in protest, but the higher-ranking colonel waved him off with a sigh, unimpressed. Without delay, Hazen exited the room, offering a respectful nod. Despite their efforts, his dignity remained untouched. Once Hazen left the room, the officers gleefully imagined his downfall, already savoring the image of his execution. In contrast, a more level-headed officer reflected on another matter, weighing recent achievements against strict protocol before dismissing a demotion. Around a strategy table, urgency mounted. The colonel pressed for updates, eager to seize the fortress before their momentum waned. Unexpectedly, the blonde officer announced the fortress had already fallen to the mysterious Kumin tribe. Their swift action had rendered the plan obsolete. The colonel erupted in disbelief, insulted by the Kumin's intervention. But the younger man corrected him. The Kumin's attack had saved them. Colonel demanded to reclaim the fortress immediately, but the younger officer warned that breaking the ceasefire with the Kumin tribe would damage imperial credibility. Frustrated and cornered, one officer erupted in anger, blaming Hazen for yet another strategic disruption. To regain control, the colonel pointed to nearby imperial-held land originally taken from the Kumin. It was of little strategic worth due to its terrain. Considering their options, they proposed a land exchange. Trading the worthless land for the vital fortress would benefit the empire. With forced modesty, the colonel accepted praise as others applauded the idea, claiming the plan as his own success. Despite the objections, the colonel ordered immediate negotiations with the Kumin tribe, but explicitly excluded Hazen, unaware of the complications this caused. Another officer lost his temper, furious at the suggestion they relied too heavily on Hazen, lashing out physically in frustration. Their fury escalated into scorn, berating hesitation and mocking the difficulty of diplomatic work. One of them arrogantly volunteered, promising swift results within days, masking desperation behind a boastful grin and hollow confidence. The colonel agreed to the plan, and rewarded the man's ambition at the same time. He punished Captain Lorenzo with house arrest for questioning him. Lorenzo walked the quiet halls under watch, surprised to find Hazen waiting calmly outside. He quickly slipped into Hazen's room, revealing that he too had been placed under house arrest. The two shared updates behind closed doors. Hazen thanked Lorenzo for subtly passing along the land exchange idea without using his name, knowing it was the only way the others would accept it. To Hazen, it didn't matter who received the credit as long as the outcome served the empire. With a faint smile, Hazen hinted that those acting without him were bound to fail. He simply waited for it to unfold. Hazen withheld a key detail, telling Lorenzo he couldn't reveal it not because of mistrust, but because Lorenzo was too principled to accept it. Their philosophies clashed. Hazen admitted their solutions differed, even if their goals were aligned for the Empire's benefit. Lorenzo reluctantly accepted Hazen's logic, warning him not to cause trouble during suspension. Hazen simply offered to do his best. The next day, a cheerful officer welcomed a new group, feigning warmth, despite the pressure of an urgent assignment. Officer tasked them with negotiating directly with the Kumin tribe. The surprised men were clearly unprepared for what awaited them. An officer cautiously pointed out that only Hazen's unit had the means to speak with the Kumin tribe, but his comment was met with fury. The superior exploded, branding Hazen a criminal unworthy of trust, refusing to even hear his name spoken in the room. Faced with a dilemma, another officer recalled Warrant Officer Buzz as the only other interpreter besides Hazen, though less experienced. Buzz had been sent on a distant mission, and though the connection to Hazen raised concerns, his use was reluctantly approved. Panic surged when they learned Buzz was deep undercover, unreachable for 2 months. Every alternative was unavailable. The merchant they hoped for had left for the Empire's far eastern provinces and wouldn't return for months. The superior officer lashed out in frustration, stomping furiously as his subordinates failed to offer solutions. His temper replaced strategy. Despite resistance, one officer muttered the reality aloud without Hazen. Negotiation was impossible. Pressed for alternatives, the enraged superior deflected responsibility, insisting his rank meant giving orders, not answers. Cornered by reason, he was urged to lift Hazen's suspension. Pride had blinded him, but the mission's success left no room for ego. Faced with failure, the officers stood their ground. They admitted Hazen's unmatched ability, regretting how many lives were lost under misguided leadership. Without another word, they left the room. The once boastful major stood alone, hand trembling as the door shut behind them. Panic overtook him. Realizing the situation was collapsing beyond recovery, he shouted in despair, overwhelmed by the consequences awaiting him. Spiraling deeper, he saw the future unravel. His promotion lost, his credibility shattered, his declaration a public failure. Desperate, he ran through the halls, banging on Hazen's door pleading for help. Arrogance had vanished, replaced by frantic hope. While grumbling about being a major, Simon cursed his subordinates and stormed toward Hazen's room. Angry, he had to grovel. To his shock, a young girl answered. Confused and judgmental thoughts crossed his mind until he remembered his objective. Inside, Hazen remained composed, reading calmly, as Simon burst in and demanded cooperation, citing military rank. Unfazed, Hazen rejected the order. The promise of lifting his suspension meant little. Death awaited him either way. Dropping the paper, he reminded the major that someone of his rank had no power to offer real favors, only empty authority. Desperation drove the major to his knees. He begged Hazen for the Empire's sake, apologizing for his earlier disrespect. Hazen calmly approached and asked him to lift his head. The gesture was polite, but tension filled the air. Without warning, Hazen delivered a hard kick to the major's face, sending him crashing down with a brutal reminder of reality. Anger seethed in Hazen's voice. The Empire didn't need apologies, it needed accountability. The damage done to his future couldn't be erased by words. Faced with Hazen's fury, the major offered anything: money, promotion, whatever it took. Hazen asked if he truly meant anything. With a smirk, Hazen mockingly demanded horse manure, echoing the very humiliation Simon once threatened him. With shock spread across the room, the girl and Simon froze, unable to comprehend what they'd just heard. The girl hesitantly confirmed the request, appalled by its cruelty. Hazen affirmed, it calm and unflinching. Smiling coldly, Hazen reminded her that it was Simon who first used that tactic when he had the upper hand. Such behavior was his habit. Turning away, Hazen dismissed the argument. This wasn't about feasibility, it was about consequences, and whether fairness truly mattered to those in power. With cold clarity, Hazen declared his principle: strike first when threatened and show no mercy to enemies who draw blades against him. His foot pressed down on the major's head. If the man couldn't follow through, he was free to leave, but wasting time wasn't tolerated. Torn between humiliation and ambition, the major faced a cruel choice: endure disgrace or lose his shot at promotion. Trembling, he asked for Hazen's power in return. Hazen agreed if he had the resolve to go that far. Just before the act, the girl intervened, begging Hazen to stop. Even she couldn't bear to witness such degradation. Unable to endure the pressure, the girl interrupted, declaring she would act as the interpreter for the Kumin tribe herself. But Hazen swiftly stopped her, splattering a bowl of slop and silencing her with a stern reminder he wouldn't tolerate interference. He coldly clarified the matter was a binding contract between him and her, and outsiders had no right to intercede. Yet she remained quiet. then asserted her legal position she was a dependent, not authorized to change contract terms. Until, to Hazen's surprise, she produced a signed termination order. Control now slipped from his hands, revealed she had read the contract, and secured the orphanage director's signature, rendering the agreement void. She presented the termination document, and insisted it should be enough. Though Hazen pointed out the attached penalty fee, smirked and turned to Major Simon, suggesting he had the means to cover the cost instead. With urgency, she demanded Simon form a new contract with her, offering her services in exchange for 10 gold coins. Hazen reveals a signed letter from Director Norway, granting the authority to terminate the contract independently. Before anyone else could respond, the girl steps up with determination and offers to pay the penalty herself, her body visibly shaking under pressure. Clarifying the process, Hazen explains that proper documentation and asset verification will be needed. The girl confidently promises to handle everything within a single day, surprising both men with her unexpected initiative and drive. Rather than gratitude, Simon bursts into mocking laughter. Yet beneath the surface, panic sets in. Hazen observes him closely, suspecting that this girl may be his hidden vulnerability. Hazen, showing no patience, instructs them to finalize the contract quickly. Simon, emboldened by the development, orders the girl to prepare her belongings and declares she'll live in his room once the deal is complete. Believing he has outsmarted everyone, Simon erupts in wild celebration, overcome with delusional victory and pride. Away from his view, Hazen praises the girl for her performance. She smiles slyly, confirming that the act played out as planned. Holding the forged contract, she notes its flaws and hidden trap, one that allows her master to reclaim her later for a minimal cost. Simon kneels in awe, convinced the girl is a divine figure. Hazen observes calmly, knowing people often believe whatever suits their desires. Rifa, the master's bodyguard, is assigned to accompany the girl. Her presence serves both as protection and an opportunity to expose the Empire's corruption. In a moment of reflection, Hazen explains that judging others takes experience, and sometimes encountering filth sharpens perception. Despite the blunt lesson, she admits Hazen, for all his faults, is far better than her previous master, as they prepare to part ways. The girl expresses gratitude. Hazen advises her to stay sharp, while she quietly acknowledges the orphanage also benefited. By the time her packing was done, the sun had already begun to set. Curious and winded, the girl asked Rafa how she could serve someone like Hazen. Rafa explained that while Hazen could be harsh, he never mistreated good people. His judgment fell only on the corrupt and weak. Embarrassed by the praise, the girl blurted out a denial, though it was clear she wasn't entirely convinced herself. Her luggage, once small, had grown. She confessed the books were borrowed, hoping to learn more in her spare time, admired her dedication. As they reached their destination, the girl braced herself. Her real test was about to begin. Simon hesitates as he looks over the document, seeking confirmation before signing the agreement that seals the deal. His suspicion flares upon noticing Riefa's presence. Accusations of espionage fly, but the girl quickly explains Riefa is now officially employed under her. Despite the explanation, Riefa remains unimpressed. Her icy glare and sharp tone expose his awkward behavior. The girl reminds him of the stakes. Though reluctant, he dismisses the risk, claiming he saved the money for a promotion bribe anyway. With bold strokes, he signs the contract, declaring his unwavering commitment, unaware he's walking into a carefully laid trap. While Simon complains about its remote location, the others feel an uneasy tension in the air. Yan joyfully reunites with Kosaku, exchanging warm hugs. Their closeness draws a disapproving remark from Simon, who deems the gesture inappropriate. Kosaku defends the hug as cultural, but Simon mocks it as barbaric. Despite the clash of customs, the two share a moment of laughter and head inside. Yan offers respectful congratulations on a recent victory. Her warm reception suggests familiarity and shared history watching. Others greet so formally, she awkwardly suggests Simon follow suit, though he clearly has other ideas. Without warning, Simon lunges forward and embraces the chieftainess inappropriately, ignoring all decorum as stunned onlookers freeze in disbelief. He justifies his behavior as a cultural greeting, twisting earlier words to fit his actions. Yan, horrified, screams in outrage at the escalating scene. Furious, the tribal guards react instantly. Their weapons crackle with power as they accuse Simon of dishonoring their leader. A mob erupts in fury, with weapons raised and chants of execution filling the air. Chaos takes hold. Yan falls into despair, convinced it's the end for herself, for the mission, and for everyone tied to it. The chieftainess raises her hand, commanding her guards to stand down. Tension melts into reluctant calm under her authority. Shudders in frustration, realizing Simon is a textbook imperial flattering the powerful and abusing the weak. Refocusing the meeting, the chieftainess moves straight to business. A territorial exchange with the Empire is proposed, the map laid bare on the table. She reveals the land holds no value for her people, but is priceless to the Empire. Her conditions for trade won't be cheap. Simon responds with thinly veiled insults. Jan attempts to moderate, but his arrogance poisons the atmosphere once again. Wearing a strained smile, Jan praises the Queen's insight, nervously hoping her softened translation will pass unnoticed. The Queen, however, is unimpressed. She grabs Jan, insisting that phrases like barbarian's dog and trash heap are crucial to conveying Simon's full character towering over Jan. She threatens punishment, should there be another case of dishonest translation, sending shivers down the girl's spine. Meanwhile, Simon continues to run his mouth, unaware the Queen and her officers may already understand his crude speech. Jan stiffly warns him to watch his words too late. The Queen already knows everything. Simon mocks the Queen with degrading language, convinced she can't understand a word. His arrogance blinds him completely. Despite the insults, the Queen only smiles. Simon mistakes her calm as ignorance, while Jan realizes it's anything but her silence is deliberate. To move things along, the Queen outlines her proposal, listing 5 territories. Jan, still shaking, relays the terms with careful gratitude, dismisses her approach, claiming their side fought hard for the fortress and deserves even greater compensation. Jan quietly reflects on the challenge ahead. Imperial policy demands expansion, yet the negotiations risk losing critical ground. Frustrated with her own lack of preparation, Jan regrets falling asleep during her reading. While some land requests make sense, others seem deliberately difficult to govern. Simon objects taking 3 locations is too steep a price, and he outright rejects most of the proposal. A compromise is offered. Only 2 locations, Manhwa and Goldia, are suggested. With a reluctant grunt, he agrees. No one gets a break. Just as they plan to sign later, a sharp voice cuts in, pushing for immediate finalization. Colonel Gedult enters with authority. Talks may be over, but his arrival signals something more than routine oversight. Formally kneels and thanks the Queen, honoring both the recent victory and her cooperation in the land deal. The display of etiquette overwhelms Jan, compared to the chaos earlier. The professionalism nearly brings her to tears. Simon, stunned, calls the gesture excessive. Gedult explains her authority extends over multiple tribes, a monarch in her own right. News that the exchanged territories are held by a rival faction sends Simon into gleeful celebration. While praising Simon's efforts, Gedult acknowledges the fortress's value for the Empire. Negotiations, though harsh, ended in strategic gain. Admiring Gedult's finesse, Jan observes how both sides continue to test each other beneath their smiles. His diplomacy leaves a lasting impression. The Queen silently studies the finalized terms. A subtle smirk follows, hinting she's fully aware of the deeper implications. Peace settles as relocation plans are confirmed. Gratitude is exchanged, and Jan quietly celebrates the successful end of tense negotiations. That evening, laughter and toasts echo across the fortress. Officers cheer their historic achievement with wine in hand. Tipsy and triumphant, the men bask in their promotions, offering vague encouragement while already drifting out of reach. Celebration echoes around the fortress. Officers beam with pride, but Jan stands apart, quietly labeling the whole affair a disaster. Details of the final land exchange come to light. Goldia and Manhwa were indeed handed over. Shock spreads across the room. Drunken laughter fills the air as one officer realizes they truly signed away Manhwa. Panic sets in as the implications sink deeper. Another trembles, recognizing the gravity of the mistake. Gedult's signature makes it official. There's no turning back. Manhwa isn't just any land, it houses the tomb of the 13th Emperor, a sacred site now lost. Hazen raised a critical point, questioning why land tied to the 13th Emperor Silgana's tomb was part of the treaty. The young officer stressed its historical value. Silgana was one of the Empire's greatest builders. Surrendering such ground would disgrace the imperial family. Another official responded with disbelief, clearly unaware of the tomb's importance and dismissing it as irrelevant. The commanding officer reacted furiously. Including sacred land risked more than scandal. It threatened their lives if discovered by central authorities. Tension escalated fast. Desperate to fix the blunder, the nervous officer begged to annul the clause and destroy the document. Hazen pushed back against the panic, warning that tearing up a signed treaty would damage the Empire's reputation beyond repair. At Algid Fortress, plans shifted quickly. A decision was made to resume talks, even if the opposing side demanded further territorial concessions. Soon after, The delegation appeared before a lavishly dressed noblewoman who welcomed them with calm amusement. The junior officer, drenched in nervous sweat, attempted to suggest an error in the land terms, but his claim was dismissed with confidence. Jedal tried to downplay the choice, proposing alternative regions, yet the woman firmly stated that her interest was solely in Manhwa. With a twisted smile, the woman revealed her true motive: she planned to desecrate the tomb of the emperor who had devastated her people. Realization struck the imperial officers. She had deliberately targeted Manhwa, and now their pleas for mercy fell on deaf ears. Recognizing one of the envoys, she exposed him as the man who insulted her people during prior talks, switching seamlessly to the imperial tongue. Caught off guard, both men scrambled to deny wrongdoing, sweating as they tried to shift blame and explain the misunderstanding. Without emotion, she activated a recording device, intending to expose their words and challenge the empire's integrity. Footage from the magic device exposed Ximon's vile remarks and humiliating behavior, capturing his crude words and actions toward the tribal leader. Colonel Jedal, shocked and furious, condemned his subordinate's disgraceful conduct and begged forgiveness, unable to hide his disgust. Lowering his head, he seethed with rage, the weight of shame and failure pressing down as judgment loomed. Both officers bowed deeply, trembling as they pleaded for mercy. Overwhelmed by the consequences of Ximon's offense, ignoring their panic, the woman issued a command with calm authority. Heisenheim was to be brought forward before further discussion. Inside the carriage, Jedal scolded Ximon for his disgraceful behavior and questioned what actions he planned to take next. Attempting to shift responsibility, Ximon suggested Hazen handle the negotiations, only to be silenced by Jedal's growing rage. Captain Lorenzo was reluctantly approached for support, but he deflected, doubting his ability and trying to avoid involvement. Jedal rejected any notion of leniency, explaining that favoritism would only lead to empty gratitude, not real accountability. Another officer observed quietly, noting that Hazen now held leverage over Jedal, one earned by confronting him without fear or hesitation. Ximon, kicked out and crawling in desperation, begged Hazen to intervene with Queen Bargia, promising anything, even humiliation, to fix his mistake. Closing his book, Hazen paused, his thoughts drifting darkly toward a conclusion that had long simmered in silence. With a chilling smile, he voiced his resentment, wishing death upon the corrupt officers who tainted the empire from within. He mocked their fall, revealing that with the purge of another faction, Lorenzo would remain his only superior, no need for others. Jedal challenged him, but Hazen's calm reply was sharp and clear. His superior's head was positioned a little too high, lashed out in disbelief, while Ximon cowered, groveling on the floor, clearly more aware of his position than his superior. Hazen reminded them of the stakes. Without his consent to negotiate, the entire clan faced execution. With calculated precision, he revealed private details about Jedal's family, insinuating that incompetence would cost them all dearly. The colonel exploded, demanding respect, but Hazen met his anger coldly, questioning if the warning was meant for him. Unfazed, Hazen declared he was simply stating what would come. Jedal, shaken, had no answer to his rising authority. With a twisted smile, Hazen declared his indifference, wishing death upon the entire group and their families. Jedal, enraged and desperate, grabbed him, pleading for his family to be spared, but Hazen placed full blame on his incompetence. Falling to his knees, Jedal begged for mercy, clutching at any chance for salvation, his pride shattered. In response, Hazen seized him by the hair and coldly reminded him of the time he tried to destroy Hazen's career with a false charge. Defeated and trembling, Jedal apologized, retracting everything in hopes of saving what little remained. Jedal and Ximon pleaded for forgiveness, but Hazen remained unmoved, asking why he should even consider negotiating. In a panic, Jedal offered Hazen a promotion, one that would skip Ximon entirely and elevate him instead. Hazen doubted the offer, noting how rare it was to leap multiple ranks, though technically he remained just a second lieutenant. Confused and irritated, he questioned why Jedal deserved any promotion after cowering during the battle. Grabbing the colonel, Hazen demanded acknowledgement. Whose victory was it, truly? The answer was already clear. Hazen issued a chilling condition: Jedal must decline his own promotion and elevate Captain Lorenzo instead. The colonel hesitated, shocked by the demand, but Hazen coldly reminded him that refusal would mean death for them all. Realizing he had no choice, Jedal shouted his agreement, desperately trying to preserve what little power he had left. Meanwhile, Hazen was confronted by another officer who refused to rise through corruption, unwilling to compromise his principles. Faced with the empire's decay, he saw the truth clearly, yet struggled with Hazen's ruthless methods to cut away the rot. Jedal, desperate, begged Lorenzo to accept Hazen's terms. While Lorenzo coldly warned that refusing would doom Gedal's entire clan, Hazen placed a hand on Lorenzo's shoulder, urging him to stop clinging to integrity while pretending to be uninvolved. Lorenzo threatened to defect, knowing his departure would weaken the empire, but ultimately agreed to stay if only to keep Hazen in check. Even so, he made it clear he would never support Hazen's ruthless tactics, or the man himself. He respected his honesty, entrusting the role to Lorenzo precisely because of his hatred for the promotion. Before departing for the fortress, Hazen turned to Simon and calmly declared his intent to buy back Yan. Simon eagerly agreed, suggesting an inflated price, only to be corrected. 10 gold coins merely covered his penalty, while Yan's buyback was set at 3. As Simon protested, Hazen continued lowering the offer first to 5 silver coins, then to 1, leaving the man flustered and desperate. Watching this unfold, Yan grew increasingly embarrassed, realizing that every word from Simon only diminished her worth. Finally, Hazen secured the deal. With a warm smile, he welcomed Yan back. Reflecting on Simon's behavior, mused aloud at how casually the man had devalued Yan's worth. With Gedal's signature secured, Hazen assigned him under Captain Lorenzo's command, and sarcastically promised him a decorative post. Simon, anxious, begged for a role as well. Hearing this, Hazen assured him of an important duty, one with the promise of promotion. He tossed an item to Simon, who accepted it nervously, unsure of what it signified. Hazen clarified cruelly from now on, Simon would be treated as livestock, his value beneath even animals. Queen Bargia, lounging in ease, was surprised to hear that Hazen's party had actually arrived, something she hadn't expected. As Hazen entered the corridor, her curiosity turned to shock at the bizarre sight that followed. Simon appeared in chains, crawling beside Hazen, who offered him as a gift to apologize for past offenses. Bargia rejected the offer with disdain, and Hazen, smiling, agreed that neither of them wanted him anyway. Protested loudly, reminding Hazen of his promised promotion, but Hazen dismissed him coldly, ordering his immediate imprisonment. Mocking applause followed, as Hazen noted how close Simon came to earning a 2-rank posthumous promotion. Dragged away, the disgraced officer screamed in terror, while discussion shifted toward territory proposals without missing a beat. Bargia smiled, admitting her resistance strategies were now meaningless. Yan received swift instructions to begin drafting the contract. Celebration broke out, but urgency remained. Hazen urged completion by morning, joking that his liver couldn't survive another day. Lounging beside her guest, Bargia praised his strategic flair. Despite his alliance, she doubted any loyalty to the Empire burned in him. A sharp question pierced the air. Suspicion grew around Hazenheim as doubts formed about his identity and ultimate objective. Beneath the flickering lamplight, Hazen withheld the truth about his past. When asked about his identity, he chose silence. Rather than explain further, he made a request. The Kumin tribe was to quietly build strength in the mountains over the next 2 years. Surprisingly, the woman didn't press him. She accepted the mission without seeking justification, sensing that her questions would remain unanswered. Though Hazen framed it as a simple agreement, she saw sincerity in his restraint and acknowledged a debt. Time passed, and her people flourished, safe from conflict, nourished, and free to live in peace. Under the moonlight, Hazen and the Queen quietly reflected on the nature of peace. She dismissed the idea of eternal calm, calling it an illusion, while Hazen labeled it as fleeting. With calm resolve, she spoke of perseverance. The only way to extend fragile peace was to keep pushing forward. Hazen listened in silence, his expression firm as distant mountains stood beneath the night sky. Later, he reviewed documents from an all-night session, while a weary girl handed him a completed contract. Surprised chatter followed, as suspicions rose about Hazen's quiet coordination with the Queen. A strategic error surfaced as Hazen confronted a fellow officer, revealing that the misstep began long ago, when the High Command dismissed his initial proposal. Elsewhere, the girl struggled to comprehend the depth of his plan, surprised that it had been in motion since the earliest stages of conflict. Hazen explained his logic calmly. If territorial shifts were inevitable, then the result should benefit the Empire as much as possible. Meanwhile, uninformed officers mocked one another, blind to the manipulation occurring around them. Amid confusion, Hazen criticized the girl's lack of awareness, linking her failure to her unread history. Hazen reminded his student that true learning required independent effort, not blind reliance on his guidance alone. Reflecting on the flaws of leadership, he pointed to humanity's weakness, how unqualified individuals often rise to power. Yan, still unsure, recalled her impressions of the officers. Some, like Major Simon, were clearly corrupt, but others appeared ordinary. Clarified that even capable men could fail. Colonel Gedal, for instance, had let loyalty cloud his command and cripple a vital fortress. With quiet urgency, he urged her to sharpen her instincts. Deception often hides behind the mask of virtue. Amazed yet unimpressed, Yan playfully mocked Queen Bargia before being dragged away in jest, her mood light despite the formal setting. What began as a teasing exchange ended with her clinging dramatically to the queen, prompting Hazen to quietly observe their bond with resignation. In the following days, North Galna Fortress transformed into a center of constant motion, its halls echoing with hurried footsteps and shifting orders. A brief but polite exchange passed between Hazen and Lorenzo, laced with mutual understanding beneath veiled sarcasm. Under Hazen's direction, Colonel Gettle stood at attention as he received orders regarding the reintegration of returning forces. Pressure built in the room as Colonel Gettle stood frozen before a stern warning, then hastily excused himself, bowing under the weight of command. Once alone, Lorenzo reflected on how even once great soldiers like Jidal could falter, corrupted by comfort and surrounded by agreeable voices. A quiet exchange followed. Hazen offered a warning against complacency, which was met with a calm, understanding nod. Promoted to a higher rank, Lorenzo prepared to issue his first official command, directing Hazen with measured authority. Rather than glory, the assignment led to the distant Doctrine territory, a place meant to test character, not strength. A farewell exchange carried both sincerity and jest. Despite Hazen's acceptance of the orders, Lorenzo knew defiance wouldn't have stopped him anyway. Bursting through the hallway, a young officer rushed in, eager to confirm the rumors of Hazen's reassignment. Apologies followed as the newcomer realized he had interrupted a formal meeting, but no one seemed bothered by the intrusion. Upon hearing the news, the officer's expression fell. Saying goodbye felt heavier than expected. Flattery was met with dismissal, but his reaction made clear how deeply Hazen's presence had impacted those around him. Pride swelled as Buzz expressed gratitude, finally feeling fulfillment in his work thanks to a commander who treated him with fairness. An offer followed 3 years of steady growth, and he'd earn a place among the commissioned ranks. Legal concerns surfaced, but were swiftly brushed aside. Rules could bend when potential was worth the effort. Both men laughed, aware that Hazen's promises were never made lightly, yet always carried through. Packing awaited with a casual farewell, Hazen turned to leave, puzzled by the laughter he left behind. Sarcasm met concern when Hazen brushed off help and reminded the younger officer of his unfinished training duties. Back at his desk, paperwork piled up as familiar faces returned. Yan glanced up, uncertain whether to speak, while Hazen calmly continued his task. A stack of damning documents left a man trembling. Charges, formal complaints, and a push for family disownment painted his future in chains. Cold logic met outrage. Yan fumed while Hazen simply folded his arms, unfazed by her cries of cruelty. Snowy cliffs loomed ahead. Whatever came next, it promised to be far more unforgiving than anything left behind. After a long journey south, the group arrived at Doctrine territory, a sprawling fortress far from the capital, nestled in harsh lands. Passing through the outer districts, signs of poverty lined the streets. Hazen kept his hood low while observing the suffering faces around him. Riders moved on without pause. Those left behind, bruised and forgotten, remained in the shadows. Inside the administrative zone, grandeur stood in stark contrast to what lay outside. Hazen couldn't ignore the disparity between wealth and reality. Despite its distance from the front lines, Doctrine territory revealed deeper, wrought a noble run haven masking the hardship of its people. Upon arrival, Hazen formally introduced himself as a newly appointed mid-level civil officer in the Doctrine Territory Administration. The acting governor, Vigarnal Gaina, acknowledged the assignment with a brief welcome and prompt instructions to proceed. A glance at the administrative hierarchy revealed a structure mirroring military ranks. The governor's position carried authority equivalent to a colonel. New aides soon appeared. Gilman Wana, wide-eyed and eager, was assigned as Hazen's secretary. Plans for immediate work were interrupted. Instead, a full round of formal greetings across departments now awaited him. Banquets and endless greetings caught Hazen off guard. The sheer number of expected introductions overwhelmed him quickly. Though frustrated, he scribbled away at documents while debating protocol's value. Efficiency clashed with local bureaucratic expectations. Behind the formal duties, his true mission involved improving the desert crossing route, a lifeline connecting Doctrine territory to the front line. In time, tension eased. Acknowledging solid support, Hazen admitted the secretary's practicality was more helpful than expected. Unflinching honesty, delivered without flattery, earned quiet praise, a rare gesture that left the aide visibly stunned. Gilman handed over detailed proposals, hoping they wouldn't go to waste. Hazen responded with quiet encouragement, recognizing the effort behind them. Despite flawless content, the aide panicked procedure dictated that work should never mix with greetings. Hazen dismissed the fuss and walked off. Assurance came with a subtle smile. Hazen took responsibility for both the project and its outcome, willing to take the risk. A new round of introductions began. Hazen announced himself once more as a mid-level officer, stepping into another unfamiliar office. Lavish surroundings greeted him. Senior Civil Aide Naotai Genmori welcomed him with unsettling ease and a twisted smile. Hazen arrived prepared, proposals in hand, but was quickly dismissed before a single page could be reviewed. Across the desk, the senior aide waved off paperwork entirely, insisting on idle conversation while ignoring the documents altogether. Subtle threats laced the man's words. He grinned, hinting that Hazen's worth would be measured by more than professional merit. A twisted smile widened as he leaned forward, pressing the topic with veiled implications and warped familiarity. Feigning understanding, Hazen deflected the tension with ease, offering a meal as cover for the power play unfolding beneath civility. Tempting flavors from North Galna were all it took to spark excitement. Hazen's casual mention of fresh ingredients set the bait. The governor took it immediately, offering his villa for the banquet, and imagining far more indulgent pleasures in return. Greedy assumptions flared as the man interpreted Hazen's offer in all the wrong ways, delighting in fantasies that made his gluttony clear. With a forced smile, Hazen played along, naming livestock and dairy to steer the topic toward food and away from implication. Praise came quickly. The overeager official applauded Hazen's savvy, fully convinced he'd found a kindred spirit. Feigning modesty, Hazen deflected praise for his food knowledge, masking unease behind a polite smile. Inquiry about the proposals was met with deflection. The aide's twisted grin made it clear approval would depend on more than paperwork. Unwilling but composed, Hazen resolved to endure the evening, entering Nyatai's villa under a heavy moonlit sky. With forced enthusiasm, he unveiled a grand feast tailored to every one of his host's indulgent tastes. The list of dishes overwhelmed the man, who begged for mercy, completely disarmed by the very excess he had demanded. Confusion turned to cold denial as Hazen clarified. There were no women present after all, none had been specifically requested. Rage followed swiftly. The aide exploded, accusing Hazen of missing obvious coded intentions behind their earlier conversation. Tempers flared further. Slaps rained down as the man blamed Hazen for wasting his time and costing him a meeting with his superior. Under pressure, Hazen promised to arrange companions while quietly noting the man's hypocrisy he hadn't stopped eating. Alone again, Hazen reflected on the reality of the place. Corruption, greed, and injustice were not surprising but worse than anticipated. With a cold smile, Hazen finalized his plan. Target identified, he began by putting Naotai Ganmori at the top of his list. After a brief exchange, Hazen exited the room with firm resolve behind the door. Emma had been waiting, clearly anxious. When confronted, she defended her presence, insisting it stemmed from genuine concern. While walking through the corridor, Hazen discovered that the acting governor already held him in contempt. Despite it being his first day, Emma pointed out the governor's rank, the most powerful figure at this base, and warned of his domineering presence. Unfazed, Hazen acknowledged the challenge. Though the superior was known for his roundabout nature, he remained confident in handling him. Standing before the desk, Hazen reflected on his reception. He suspected that arriving without a bribe had cost him favor. Though he believed evaluations should be grounded in merit. Rather than deny it, he accepted the unfair posting. Emma questioned his lack of ambition, but Hazen viewed promotion as just one part of a greater purpose. As they passed through a dim corridor, Emma warned him of the corruption rotting the capital from within. With calm determination, he promised to produce results and return quickly. Arriving at the villa, Hazen burst in energetically, greeting Naotai with exaggerated cheer. With a theatrical gesture, Hazen presented a group of starving, ragged civilians. He ordered them to eat freely, turning to the stunned official with a sharp remark. These were the people suffering under his leadership. Trembling with fury, the governor slammed the table. Clutching a wine bottle, he demanded to know what Hazen was plotting. Enraged, the man barked out an execution order, calling guards to eliminate the insolent newcomer on the spot. Remaining composed, Hazen slowly drew his blade as the guards lunged toward him, ready to retaliate without hesitation. With swift, calculated strikes, Hazen disarmed the charging guards. The overwhelming speed sent the drunken governor tumbling backward in shock. Amid the chaos, frightened women flinched. Yet even in the face of danger, they watched as Hazen swiftly incapacitated the attackers without pause. His gloved hand slammed into the governor's face, silencing any protests. The room fell into stunned silence. He condemned the man's cruelty, pointing to the starving civilians as proof. Though unexpected, the confrontation marked Hazen's forceful debut. After the dust settled, one woman hesitantly stepped forward. When asked her name, she answered softly, Kiana. Gazar leapt into action at Hazen's command. Though he grumbled about his superior's intensity, With a confident grin, Hazen declared that Kiana and the others would now live as bandits, a decision that stunned everyone present. Protests erupted, but Hazen casually assigned Gazar as their new leader, leaving no room for argument. He outlined the cover story: the starving civilians had raided the villa and captured the corrupt governor. Their crimes would be justified by the cruelty they endured. As the bound official was beaten, Hazen dismissed his outrage, stripping him of stolen wealth with cold efficiency. The governor scoffed at Hazen's plan, claiming there was no evidence to tie him to any wrongdoing. With arms folded, he added that even if it hadn't, he could fabricate proof so damning that the man's own family would disown him. Sweat trickled down the official's face. He tried to laugh it off, questioning who would believe such slander. Hazen's expression didn't waver. He simply stated the truth. Everyone would believe it, because it aligned with the governor's reputation. Cornered, the man broke. He promised to reform, use his wealth to aid the poor, and govern for the people. Hazen clapped his hands and ordered the group to split up, instructing them to haul out the valuables along with the disgraced official. With a twisted grin, he clarified his earlier words. "I'll consider it." Positively was nothing more than code. The governor fumed, claiming no one could interpret such hidden meaning. Hazen coldly responded that even after consideration, he still offered no mercy. He explained that he couldn't understand the mindset of a man driven by depravity. Later that night, Gazar watched the aftermath with a drink in hand. He muttered about Hazen's uncanny talent for landing in chaotic assignments. Hazen surveyed the region's grim reality. Excessive taxation, hoarding, and corruption had left citizens drained. Gizar scoffed at the dysfunction, remarking that losing a war to internal power struggles would be laughable. Kiana approached, trembling, to report that everything was packed. Hazen acknowledged her with a nod, unamused by how obvious the situation had become. He issued orders to sell off the seized goods through a merchant and ensure the women were trained for useful roles within months. Curious, questioned Hazen's next move. Hazen simply brushed it off, critiquing the crude phrasing of pulling something off. Plans were laid out: dismantling corruption, restoring supply lines to Lyld, and addressing the regional drought. Progress hinged on intel being gathered. With unwavering confidence, Hazen set a timeline. All objectives would be completed within 6 months. After entering the office, Hazen is greeted by Gilmand, who appears unusually energetic. Upon inspecting Gilmand's condition, Hazen discovers he stayed up all night handling paperwork. The reports, however, weren't time-sensitive. Hazen disapproves of the unnecessary exhaustion. Rather than praise the effort, Hazen calmly instructs Gilmand to take the rest of the day off. Though confused, Gilmand hesitates. Hazen warns that heavier workloads may come, so stamina must be preserved. Gilmand nods and exits slowly. Wandering through the hallway, Gilmand reflects on the rare break. Suddenly, a child running by catches his attention. Gilmand stumbles upon a girl in the hallway and questions her presence. She calmly responds, catching him off guard with her confidence. Before he can react, Hazen enters and introduces the girl as Yan, his personal secretary. Her bright greeting leaves Gilmand stunned by her age. As Yan departs, Hazen reassures Gilmand that his abilities are solid, but reminds him not to compare himself with someone as exceptional as her. Yan reports her findings with ease, while pouting about Hazen treating others more kindly than her. Effortlessly, she explains her methods. Even Hazen is left impressed by her accuracy and speed. While examining a map, Hazen notes that all supply routes are inefficient detours. Yan, puzzled by his gaze, backs away nervously. They discuss the desert's lack of a direct route. Hazen points out the challenge of transporting water. Despite her concern, Hazen proposes using magic to make it rain. Yan doubts the practicality of relying on unpredictable weather. She reveals the Empire lacks magical tools for such feats. Still, witnessing the people's struggles pushes her to believe in a solution. Hazen recognizes her resolve. An oasis, he concludes, could bring both relief and stability to the suffering land. Efforts to build an oasis face a setback without a proper foundation. Any rain summoned would vanish. The workforce entrusted to Gazar needs weeks to become effective. With limited time, Hazen delegates the task to Yan and sets off to personally inspect conditions elsewhere. She accepts with a determined nod. At headquarters, Chief Secretary Venice erupts over the lack of contact with Aide Nyotai. Reports hint at a possible attack. Staff members struggle to recall crucial details about recent visitors, drawing Venice's anger and suspicion. Realizing the risk, Venice fears for Nyotai's safety and the jobs of those closest to him. Venice paces restlessly, suspicions mounting against Hazen. A knock interrupts his thoughts, and a shadow appears at the doorway, calmly inquiring about Senior Civil Aide Nyotai, while referencing the proposals he submitted the previous day. Mozcall and his assistant freeze in recognition. The chief secretary's expression turns wary upon realizing who has arrived. Feigning courtesy, Venice invites Hazen to sit, stating that they coincidentally have business with him as well. Listens as Venice explains, they've lost contact with Nyotai. With tension thick in the room, concern begins to deepen. Mozcall slams down accusations, linking the villa attack to the same night Hazen had met with Nyotai. Suspicion intensifies. Rather than deny, Hazen responds coolly. In his view, disappearances are common whether through desertion or death, especially on the front lines. Civil officers aren't exposed to the same dangers, and Hazen's meeting record is mysteriously blank. Smiling, Hazen deflects. He mentions that the others were asleep, and claims he tried waking them, an explanation that raises eyebrows angered. Mozcall slams the table. He accuses Hazen of manipulating them with magic, refusing to accept any excuses. With a smirk, Hazen questions the lack of proof. He reminds them that recording meetings was their responsibility, not his. The assistant retorts sharply, pointing out they could have reconstructed the events from memory, yet chose not to. Pen in hand, Hazen offers to fill in the blanks himself, insisting he remembers every detail, his tone dark and deliberate. A falsified report is produced, claiming Nyotai approved Hazen's proposals. One observer trembles, recognizing the audacity behind the act. Mozcall explodes in disbelief. The idea of Nyotai actually working that hard seems utterly impossible to him. With a sly grin, Hazen brings up a recent consultation involving someone named Rako Zaluo. Just one more push, he thinks. He reveals disturbing complaints tied to a certain client of a secretary. Across the table, hands begin to tremble. Shameful memories surface, ones involving personal preferences in a private bar. Humiliation flickers across the man's face. Fantasy and reality blur. Despite the setting, overstepping boundaries at the wrong place becomes clear. Dressed in character, the man demands full accommodation. His desperate outburst only adds to the crumbling illusion of control. Hazen sighs, revealing he conducted interviews to confirm the situation. Multiple victims and witnesses had already come forward. Declaring it legal doesn't erase the shame. The pressure mounts as confidence begins to crack. Rather than argue law, Hazen shifts to something deeper, what a daughter might feel knowing her father's hidden indulgences. A family portrait flashes across the room. Names, ages, and personal details strike like precision blows. Silence follows. Mozcall lashes out in panic, but Hazen brushes him off. It's all just meticulous fact-checking and psychological disarmament, stating that legality doesn't shield one from society's harsh judgment toward those deemed different. Panic erupts. Venice drops to his knees, begging for mercy, willing to endure for the sake of his daughter's future. That plea is met with a smile. Hazen suggests they return to the matter of falsified records unless Bab prefers otherwise. Though hesitant, Venice moves to complete the record. Confidence returns briefly, thinking Hazen might be bluffing after all. Yet the trap closes. Hazen clarifies that any mismatch would place the blame solely on Venice, who sealed it based on memory. Jan enters, politely asking for Hazen. Venice flinches at her timing, reacting to the nickname Bab with horror. Without hesitation, Hazen introduces them to each other. One is his trusted secretary, the other a candidate for the second role. Attempts to protest fall flat. With Nyotai missing, Venice's current position holds no weight. Hesitation turns into rejection. Venice resents Hazen for his predicament and refuses to serve under him, despite the offer. Ignoring the mood, Hazen casually drops a question about adult diapers. Confusion spreads as Yan is suddenly pulled into the tension. Yan responds innocently to Hazen's odd question. She assumes it's medical, until he clarifies it's a preference, not a need. Disgust flashes across her face. Venice defends it as personal freedom, but shame looms behind his words. With a smile, Hazen warns how damaging such rumors could be, especially if heard by employers or family. Venice stiffens in dread. Panic takes over. He rushes forward, dropping his pride and begging Hazen for a job. Amist, Hazen agrees. Passion, he claims, is what convinced him though. Venice knows it's anything but mercy. A contract is presented. Jan handles it carefully while Hazen, now relieved, declares he can finally speak without restraint. Shock spreads when Hazen expresses high expectations specifically for Venice's unusual traits. Venice protests, expecting to be valued for his skills. Hazen admits his understanding of the adult services world is limited, but plans to learn. New orders are given social drinking, networking, and information gathering. Venice agrees hesitantly, unsure where it's heading. Hazen reflects on Venice's disturbing talents. What he once dismissed as depravity, he now sees as a unique, irreplaceable asset. Doubt creeps in. Despite shame, Venice weighs the contract's perks against his uncertain worth and signs, sealing his path forward. A term is introduced, babiness. Confused, admits his is shallow, Hazen calmly affirms. It's a real classification. Reflecting on his failures, Venice criticizes himself. Lacking subtlety, he ruins the illusion even outside of roleplay. Transformation follows. Standing proud in a diaper, he declares his intent to master his odd trait and serve with devotion. Recognition shines in Hazen's eyes. He grins with satisfaction, certain he's chosen the perfect misfit for the job. The flamboyant Mozcall Venice was unexpectedly drafted into Hazen's team. While others looked on with confusion, Hazen calmly evaluated the situation from his office. Rather than use Mozcall for infiltration, an officer suggested assigning him elsewhere. Hazen dismissed the concern, explaining that Mozcall's eccentric behavior could become a strategic asset. Scandal, he noted, was a noble's greatest vulnerability. Concerned about a proposal's rejection, the officer feared it would lead to neglect of the town's population. Instead of backing down, Hazen insisted she act directly. He intended to use the failed proposal as proof of the higher-up's failure. Hazen swiftly presented a solution, offering his personal assets in the form of promissory notes. His dedication surprised the officer. Despite his recent arrival, he prioritized the suffering citizens. Acknowledging the risk, he declared the move a gamble. Now penniless, he entrusted the success of this mission to her judgment and the people's resilience. Motivated by his faith in her, she accepted with a bright smile. Hazen, unfazed, reminded her to maintain funds for the more peculiar team members. With new resolve, she dashed off to begin preparations. Watching her go, Hazen stood silently, trusting that she would turn his bet into a victory. Yin expressed her gratitude, clenching her fist with determination. Hazen, unfazed, urged her to leave and focus on the task ahead. She sprinted down the hallway with excitement, shouting her resolve while others paused to watch her energetic departure. Watching her enthusiasm, a concerned officer questioned Hazen's decision, wondering if he was burdening Yan too heavily, both physically and emotionally. Hazen calmly explained that the mission wasn't just duty for Yan. Holding her back would only leave her with regrets. Still, the risks were undeniable. Witnessing the dying firsthand, Yan would face unbearable truths. Whether she could endure it remained uncertain. The officer voiced concern over Yan's youth and sensitivity. Despite her age, she acknowledged that Yan wouldn't shy away from confronting harsh realities. With narrowed eyes, she questioned Hazen's intent, suggesting he might be preparing Yan as his eventual successor. Tension filled the room, as she placed a firm hand on his. Her expression grew serious, asking him to remember something important. She reminded Hazen that no matter how skilled Yan was, she could never replace him. Hazen offered reassurance with calm conviction. He had no plans to make Yan his substitute, only faith in her strength and his own decision. A new letter arrived swiftly, surprising Hazen with its contents. The funds detailed inside far exceeded expectations. Hazen was stunned. Nandal had sent enough to sustain them for an entire month back at the supply hub. Nandal personally handled crates. Despite warnings about overspending, he remained focused, brushing off concerns about Hazen's demotion. He smiled calmly, explaining that status meant little to him. Supporting someone he believed in mattered more than climbing the merchant ranks. Later, Hazen handed over his response. From now on, his companion would serve as both Yan's support and her guardian in the field. Without hesitation, he committed to skipping meals to save resources. If Yan tried to follow suit, he insisted she be forced to eat. A gentle objection came his way. Cutting back wouldn't make a difference in a famine of this scale. Dismissing her concern, he likened the act to a ritual, a way to strengthen his will through personal sacrifice, much like casting a spell. That explanation earned a dramatic reaction. Amused, she accused him of acting more and more like Yantu. Days later, trouble emerged. A flustered subordinate rushed in, reporting backlash over the massive charity efforts currently underway in Yan's name. Confused by the complaints, he reviewed the situation. Since the aid was a personal donation, calling it undercutting felt excessive. Rather than argue, he decided to meet with the finance department directly. Clearly, the donation posed a threat to someone's interests. As they walked through the corridors, his subordinate hesitated, calling his name. Curiosity prompted a simple reply, "What is it?" With some hesitation, the junior officer admitted his belief. Doing right didn't guarantee success, even if intentions were noble. Arriving at the finance department, tension hung in the air, especially here. Justice rarely found solid ground. A quiet assurance broke the tension. Confidence, he said, was essential when standing for what one believed was right. Inside the finance office, tension rose. His explanation about using personal assets clashed with Gumino's demand for bureaucratic control over aid distribution. Anger spilled over as the official ranted about procedure and decorum. Accusations of idealism were thrown like weapons across the room. Unshaken, Hazen pointed to the worsening city conditions. Aid wasn't about virtue signaling. It was a necessity the finance department clearly wasn't fulfilling. That remark landed hard. The official's expression twitched with disbelief, struggling to process the direct criticism leveled against his department. A cheerful response broke the tension. His words had been understood, and that was enough for him. The finance officer stiffened, trying to regain control. Mention of the deputy minister's disapproval only added fuel to his growing frustration. Rank was thrown like a weapon. According to him, someone of Hazen's position had no right to approach the deputy minister directly. Rules were cited, but logic countered them. As long as appointments could be scheduled, status shouldn't block communication. Panic settled in. Backpedaling quickly, the officer insisted he'd speak on Hazen's behalf, clearly desperate to keep him away from higher powers. With quiet confidence, he turned to leave, planning to escalate the matter through proper channels. Nearby, the older officer muttered complaints under his breath. Suspicion leaked from the man's tone as he connected Hazen to Nyotai's command. A knowing smirk dismissed the prying curiosity. Challenge met resistance. Hazen leaned in, questioning why direct contact with the deputy minister provoked such discomfort. Strained composure finally cracked. Twitching with pressure, the officer recoiled as a paper flew past him. An unexpected apology followed. Alone again, the man scoffed bitterly. He believed Hazen's lack of influence would keep him from getting anywhere, regardless of resolve. News arrived fast. Approval for a meeting with the senior administrator came through. With little leverage left, Hazen prepared for the negotiation. Moldad welcomed him calmly, showing little surprise. Despite the abrupt timing, he agreed to the discussion without resistance. Skipping pleasantries, Hazen cited the deputy minister's objection to his charitable aid. The matter, he implied, needed urgent clarification. Though Moldad acknowledged the finance department's involvement, he admitted confusion. Raising such an issue over personal donations felt excessive. Relaxing in his chair, Moldad questioned the point of continuing. In his eyes, it was like pouring water into a desert. Remarks about formalities drew a sharp response. To Hazen, taking action mattered more than observing etiquette in a palace overflowing with indulgence. A smirk spread across Moldad's face. He warned that while Hazen's efforts were admirable, they might backfire without support from the finance department. Firm in his stance, Hazen clarified his intentions. Cooperation was ideal, but he wouldn't compromise his path out of fear or pressure. Leaning back with a sigh, Moldad admitted a soft spot for such conviction. Setting expectations, he described himself as a mere buffer, nothing more than a middle manager trying to bridge the gap between resistance and change. A casual farewell masked the mutual respect between them. Moldad brushed off the compliment, directing it toward Nyotai instead. While walking, Moldad mentioned rumors of Nyotai's disappearance. He even admitted things operated more smoothly, in his absence, something Hazen quietly agreed with. Their conversation turned to the deeper issue. Moldad explained that stature, not morality, dictated actions. That kind of bold initiative, coming from an outsider, unsettled those above. Some would view it as a personal affront to their pride. Before parting, Moldad asked if he had fallen short in Hazen's eyes. With a sincere look, Hazen expressed the opposite. He held him in esteem. Praise was met with humility. Hazen respected Moldad for acknowledging his own flaws, a rare trait among high-ranking officials. Their conversation eased into light banter. Moldad warned not to overdo the admiration, but accepted the sentiment with a small smile. While passing a balcony, loud voices and a bang drew attention. Hazen glanced down, spotting familiar figures in a panic. A smirk curled across his face. Panic and confusion overtook the flustered officer below, who could only stammer in disbelief. Inside, a grand office, the vice minister looked up. Calmly, he acknowledged Hazen's arrival, his expression unreadable, his interest now piqued. Recognition came quickly. The vice minister identified Hazen as the man who used his own fortune to help the people just as Gumino burst in. Calmly, Hazen confirmed the act. He asked if his actions had caused offense, to which the vice minister replied, it wasn't his place to judge personal donations. Confusion soon followed. A document had claimed objections came from the vice minister. Even the signature surprised him. Moldad presented the paper in question. It was official, sealed by the finance department. Panic took over. Gumino screamed accusations of forgery and deflection, immediately blaming the secretary who had handed him the letter that morning. Chaos erupted as Gumino screamed defensively, shouting over everyone and lashing out at the secretary. Moldad simply noted the paperwork still bore his name. Inspection revealed familiar sloppiness. Moldad pointed out a repeated error. Gumino always made clear evidence of authorship, despite his denial. What was meant to shift blame backfired. With such practiced forgeries, suspicion now turned toward broader misconduct. Sweating and cornered, Gumino panicked. He proposed investigating his own office, hoping to regain some control in front of witnesses. Unofficial inspection would take place, with all parties present to prevent tampering from either side. Time was limited. Moldad allowed 10 minutes for the investigation, prompting Hazen and Gilman to begin searching immediately. Movements didn't go unnoticed. Hazen instructed Gilman to examine the spot Gumino had instinctively watched, while he checked elsewhere with quiet certainty. Disguises unraveled fast. Duplicate documents and forged seals were uncovered beneath a hidden compartment, confirming suspicions. Hazen kept going. Another concealed drawer clicked open just as Gumino lunged forward in desperation, trying to halt the search. While Gumino screamed and confessed, Hazen calmly confirmed the final piece of evidence had been found. A hidden contract revealed evidence of slave trading. Hazen declared it enough, and an immediate order was given to detain Gumino, restrained on the floor. Gumino shouted denial, insisting he had no involvement. His panic only deepened suspicion. The search had always aimed to expose Gumino's crimes. Hazen stood before the officials as a bound administrator knelt on the floor. Evidence tied the man to slave dealings, and suspicion quickly shifted toward higher authority. Calmly analyzing the scheme, Hazen revealed that someone had imitated his identity to prevent public donations. Records showed poverty was deliberately maintained to force desperation and fuel trafficking profits. Fear of financial loss drove the deputy minister to silence reform efforts, condemning any challenge to negligence. Within the Grand Ministry courtyard, the imbalance of power became clear. Ordinary administrators rarely accessed senior officials, making direct confirmation of authority nearly impossible. Unexpectedly securing an appointment, Hazen confronted the corruption directly. Caught unprepared, the guilty official failed to conceal evidence as intervention began. The senior official studied Hazen closely, suggesting he could be involved as well. Sharp observation and composure earned reluctant acknowledgement, yet suspicion remained present within the chamber. Standing beside another officer, Hazen faced quiet scrutiny from the leadership. Their willingness to allow sudden confrontation revealed they already harbored doubts about the accused administrator's conduct. Questioned about procedure, Hazen explained he lacked authority to accuse a subordinate without firm proof. His calm acceptance of criticism contrasted with the tension gripping the restrained suspect. Orders were issued to investigate every name connected to the finance department. Determination spread among the ranks as broader complicity became increasingly difficult to deny. Responsibility was ultimately placed upon command oversight. While the elder official warned Hazen against arrogance, he privately acknowledged renewed interest sparked by the young man's resolve. Hazen rejected the idea of resignation and urged the minister to remove only the criminals. His steady expression showed confidence that corruption could be isolated without sacrificing leadership. The elder official insisted that public suffering was also his burden to bear. Tension rose as responsibility and pride clashed within the office lined with records. Leaning forward, Hazen declared that authority existed solely to protect citizens. His sharp gaze forced the minister to confront his complacency and reconsider his passive stance. A dark aura seemed to surround Hazen as pressure mounted. Overwhelmed by the intensity, the minister realized he had underestimated the resolve standing before him. By the next morning, investigations advanced swiftly. Arrests were prepared, a task force assembled, and strict silence ordered as Hazen moved decisively to end the scandal. Hazen was questioned about seeking promotion after exposing corruption. While some worried the case might be suppressed, he remained calm and allowed the investigation to proceed without hesitation. Tilting his head slightly, Hazen admitted he would welcome advancement. Ambition did not conflict with his mission, as greater authority meant broader reforms. He then asked Gilmound why he had chosen to serve the Empire. The question forced reflection on whether justice or mere livelihood guided his path. Silence followed as Gilmound reconsidered his true objective. Hazen reminded him not to lose sight of the ultimate purpose behind pursuing the case. With renewed resolve, Gilmound declared loyalty to Hazen's judgment. Determination replaced doubt as he committed himself fully to confronting corruption. Hazen left the office corridor, sensing unexpected loyalty from his subordinate. Pausing at the door, he offered brief advice before stepping away from the political tension behind him. Disguised in a hooded cloak, he traveled beyond the capital to a remote settlement. There, Jan awaited his arrival, reporting conditions across the barren landscape. Supplies had been gathered, yet many villagers could not be saved. Exhaustion marked Jan's face as she explained the limits of their efforts. Guided through rocky paths, Hazen observed the harsh environment. Accepting reality without illusion, he acknowledged that even determined officials could not perform miracles. Upon his return, relief spread among the people. Still, concern lingered as dwindling provisions threatened their uncertain future. Villagers surrounded Yan as she returned, expressing relief at her safety. Their worn faces showed gratitude toward the one who had brought them hope during hardship. Explaining her method, Yan admitted she invoked a local legend to calm unrest. By presenting authority through faith, she prevented further conflict over scarce supplies. Rumors quickly spread across the settlement after strength was displayed to stop violence. Order replaced chaos once resistance was subdued and protection became visible. Overcome with emotion, several villagers knelt and pressed their hands to the ground. Respect toward Yan deepened, as survival once again seemed possible. Embarrassed by the praise, Yan attempted to redirect credit. Nevertheless, the people continued thanking her, believing their recovery was made possible through her actions. Villagers noticed the imperial uniform beneath the cloak and panicked. Fear spread that Yan and her companions would be arrested for receiving outside assistance. Suspicions deepened as some believed the officer intended to capture them all. Yan attempted to calm the misunderstanding before tension escalated further, removing doubt with deliberate composure. Hazen declared he followed Yan by choice, inspired by her ideals. His bold claim shifted the atmosphere, turning alarm into stunned silence. Seated together, the group admitted survival could not continue day by day. Supplies were nearly gone, and uncertainty overshadowed the settlement's fragile stability. Stepping forward with resolve, Hazen presented a new path. Rather than retreat, he proposed transforming the barren land into a sustainable oasis. Hazen outlined a plan to construct a reservoir using magic, drawing water from underground layers. He explained they would not be starting from nothing, as natural resources already existed beneath the sand. The villagers listened in disbelief before hope replaced hesitation. Realizing they could secure their own supply, they no longer needed to depend on imperial control. Excitement spread across the settlement as people volunteered to assist. Word was prepared to reach neighboring communities, strengthening cooperation throughout the valley. Yan worried about relying on faith to motivate them, yet Hazen reminded her that survival justified belief. The villagers' resilience proved their determination was genuine. With plans decided, Hazen prepared to return to the capital, leaving the future oasis in their hands. He entrusted Yan with guiding the next steps. A sudden tremor shook the rocky path, forcing Hazen to shield Yan as debris scattered nearby. Dust filled the air before the disturbance finally settled. When questioned about his condition, Hazen dismissed concern, despite clear exhaustion. Yan noticed he had avoided food and water, suspecting he was straining himself for the relief effort. Admitting the truth, Hazen revealed he was testing his limits under deprivation to strengthen discipline. He believed understanding weakness was necessary to control both body and resolve. Yen reacted with frustration at his recklessness, yet continued following him through the canyon. Their mission demanded endurance, even if his methods troubled her. Later, Yan formally introduced herself beside Hazen to a composed official. Recognition spread as her growing reputation reached beyond the settlement. Hazen met Senior Administrative Officer Moldod, who quickly assessed Yan's abilities despite her youth. Light remarks about her temperament contrasted with acknowledgement of her exceptional competence. Playful tension surfaced between mentor and student, revealing a relationship built on equality rather than strict hierarchy. Moldod observed their exchange with visible amusement and approval. Attention shifted to a previously submitted proposal connected to higher authorities. Yan hesitated while Hazen clarified it concerned negligence within the upper ranks. Concerns emerged when documents failed to reach the acting consul, as expected. Suspicion deepened over unusual interference, affecting the proposal's progress. Discussion turned toward leadership at the top level. Even with a capable and decisive consul, unresolved corruption suggested deeper structural problems remained. Hazen requested assistance in arranging a formal meeting with acting consul Vigarnal. His expression remained steady, signaling that the matter was strategic rather than personal. Moldod warned that such a request would carry consequences and must not be treated lightly. He agreed to help only if Hazen accepted full responsibility for what followed. A faint smile crossed Hazen's face as he accepted the condition. Confident in his objective, he assured Moldod that standing together would strengthen their position. The next day, both men arrived at the administrative chamber. Formal introductions were exchanged as the atmosphere turned measured and cautious. Seated behind an imposing desk, acting consul Vigarnal evaluated Hazen with interest. The long-delayed proposal had finally reached the highest level. Acting Consul Vigarnial praised Hazen's proposal as rational and devoted to the people. His approval sounded sincere, yet his measured smile suggested careful calculation behind the compliment. Despite acknowledging its merit, Vigarnial stated the financial burden would be significant. He declared the matter required higher consultation and that a response would take at least half a year. Hazen reacted immediately, insisting such a delay was unacceptable. Unexpectedly, the consul replied that the timeline was acceptable, shifting the tone of the meeting, turning away. Vigarnial calmly announced the proposal would ultimately be rejected. He implied Hazen lacked the experience to understand the broader implications. With a faint smirk, the consul added that Hazen had already caused disruption. He promised to ensure the rejection personally, asserting control over the outcome. Vigarnial explained that the desert territory had once been scarcely inhabited before the Empire claimed it as a supply base. He emphasized Hazen's inexperience with the region's history. Settlers were permitted to remain under strict taxation, forming small markets that later resisted imperial demands. After suppression, they were allowed to stay through the emperor's supposed generosity. Addressing Hazen directly, Vigarnial argued that citizens must survive, but never flourish. Hazen concluded that heavy taxes were imposed deliberately to prevent local empowerment. Feigning encouragement, Vigarnial advised Hazen to treat the rejection as a lesson. His patronizing tone masked satisfaction at maintaining control. With calculated composure, Vigarnial reaffirmed his intelligence and authority. The message was clear: reform would not advance without overcoming him first. Hazen remained composed, recognizing the consul's narrow perspective, and preparing to challenge the authority controlling the desert's fate.